The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640. Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640. Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640.
And listening to the show there. I'd also like to welcome you in if you're checking me out right now on Channel 865, which is Shaw Direct, picking up the signal there. I welcome you in. Or if you're picking me up off your 3 or 4G personal communication device via the Stream the World software, I welcome you in. Or if you're what some call the best seat in the house, checking out A View from Space, sitting in front of your Mac or your PC at home, logged on to 640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming there, I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. What a shocker. The 10th anniversary is coming up to the event that changed the world forever as it's built. And when you know it, Washington, New York, on high security mode amid Al-Qaeda terror threat. It's actually all coming from one single piece of information, as usual. Now, do you think for a moment, just think there for a moment, that would Al-Qaeda, if there is this secret no-name army with no uniforms and no country, if they were going to stage another attack, why would they make it so obvious as to do it on an anniversary? So, of course, we had the big scare from all of the authorities around the world saying it's imminent. New York and Washington remain in high security mode as authorities try to sort through details of a credible 9/11 terror attack, as the 10th anniversary is just a few hours away. Though there has been no reported terrorist activity in the cities, but security has been greatly increased in New York and Washington, both sites of the September 11th, 2001 deadly terrorist attacks by Al-Qaeda, amid news that an informant considered reliable told U.S. intelligence officials of a plot to detonate a car bomb in the U.S. on the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Now, I'm telling you, right now, there is going to be no attack. I'll guarantee that. That's right. I'll go way out on that limb and say it is not going to happen. But what they want to do is fill the streets this weekend with armed police. We're headed for a police state in all of North America. Forget about just the United States of America, because we're all throwing in this pot together. Like it or not. Borders are going to come down soon, too. But they're going to put cops out on the street in such a force as never before seen, with automatic weapons brandishing on the streets of the United States in those two cities. All so that they can sell their 10th anniversary. What they really want with this 10th anniversary is they want to relive this entire thing, bring it all back to you. They didn't just do it in a one-day thing. It's been going on all week. They've been talking about it all week, running the sound bites from 10 years ago, bringing all of that as best they can back to your foreknowledge so that we'll get the feeling it happened yesterday, and we should be highly alert. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest questions is, in a poll, do you think we're safer now than we were before 9/11? Another one is, do you believe 9/11 was an inside job? Now, I can tell you right now, they're going to get these results from those two polls. The polls that asked if you feel safer, people are going to say no. That means, hey, let's throw in some new terror laws and they won't mind. Because those are dipsticks to find out how far they can press us, how far they can take it. The dipstick, what I mean by that is to check out to see how farther along the road, down this road to the Third World War we are, and how much more convincing that we need. That's really what the 10th anniversary of 9/11 is all about. So tonight on the show, if you've heard me before talk about 9/11, you will hear some of the same information. You will hear some new information also, but you will hear tonight that it was indeed, I will lay all the evidence out, that it was an inside job and we're being pushed down the road to a Third World War. After all, wasn't it the weapons inspector expert, Mark Kelly, who they're talking about in Britain right now? And there is a man that knew Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction and committed suicide, strangely enough, down the road. Well, there's an inquiry on that. There's a lot of people that don't believe that either. And as a matter of fact, they offed him simply because he was a person that had some pretty close knowledge, to name some names, of who was pulling this scam, this hoodwink job over on the rest of the world. The only reason why the world allowed the Brits and the Americans to go in to Iraq was because he had weapons of mass destruction. The only reason why we are allowed to go into Afghanistan is because that's where supposedly Al-Qaeda is. Well, we don't attack Pakistan because Pakistan, yeah, they support Al-Qaeda and they send guys over to kill us all, but we leave them alone because we got to deal with them. It's all pretty murky because, you see, in espionage and double-crossing and spies and Illuminati conspiracy plots always are locked, jammed full with these kinds of things. So when I return, I get into the numbers that were involved with the 9/11 event. And then deeper we go into finding out how. Okay, go ahead. It was done.
I say the whole takes about.
He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm the guy called Space. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. First, the numbers. 2001 World Trade Center official death toll. 10 years later. The official death toll now stands not at 3,000 or around 3,000, what you've been hearing all week. It's exactly 2,966 people That number includes 19 terrorists. All but 13 people died on that day. Those 13 eventually succumbed to their wounds and died later. One person has died since the attacks of lung cancer, which was suspected to have been caused by all of the debris from the Twin Towers, which is a combination of dust, the immense amount of burning plastics like, charge cards, plastic, that all of the hardware, computers, the keyboards. Can you imagine the toxic smoke that was coming out of there? Not to mention the paint that was in there that was burning, and then, as I said, the dust of that incredible pulverizing of that cement. And all of the chemicals and the burning upholstery and all of the rest of the contents of the two towers. When the first responders went into ground zero, you know what they were given? Thin, flimsy little paint masks. And you know what they were told? They told that it was completely safe. Not only that, but they said that they would have communication, and there was no communication. It all crashed. It all went down except for one. Do you know which one it was? It was BlackBerry. That's why Mr. Balsillie is hunted by these people. The BlackBerry was the only source of communication all day. Only. And I'm telling you now, if you want to commit a terrorist act, if you can stop every single piece of communication, you control that whole area. It's almost like having a no-fly zone over the battle zone. If you control the airspace over a battle zone, you control the battle zone. And that's what they attempted to do with killing every single piece of technology that allowed human beings to communicate. BlackBerry was the only one that couldn't be shut down. Now, there were 266 people on the 4 planes, we're told. I don't believe there were 4 planes to begin with, but that's for deeper into the show. I believe there were actually 2 aircraft. 1 missile, and 1 wasn't there at all. Completely not there at all, but superimposed on a television screen. More on that later. 266 people on these supposed 4 planes. American Airlines Flight 11 crashes into the World Trade Center. 92 aboard there, 5 terrorists. United Airlines Flight 175 crashes the World Trade Center. 65 people aboard, including 5 terrorists. Notice the small number of passengers aboard these aircraft. I will get to that, too, a little deeper into the show. American Airlines Flight 77, that's the one that supposedly hit the Pentagon. It was actually a missile. 64 were supposedly aboard that, including 5 terrorists. And United Flight 93, downed in Shanksville, blew up in the sky, plummeted to the ground into smithereens. Chunks no bigger than a dime. 45 aboard, including 4 terrorists, we're told. There were 2,595 people who died in the World Trade Center towers and near it. That's 2,595 died at the World Trade Center towers. The 2,966 includes all of the planes, the Pentagon, and the World Trade Center towers. So in the towers alone, and surrounding area, 2,595. There were 343 New York Fire Department firefighters and paramedics, 23 cops, 37 Port Authority police officers. 1,402 people died in the North Tower, where only 614 perished in the South Tower. Now, you got to ask yourself this question already. Why did more people die in the first tower that was hit, yet it stood for exactly 1 hour and 5 minutes longer than the South Tower? The second tower that was hit that day, this is what most, if not all, people forget what actually happened. The authorities said originally that there was a fire in the North Tower, the first tower that was hit, above the 93rd floor, a fire. But that the rest of the building was safe and people were told they could re-enter the building. Many forget about that. People started actually filing back into the building in the first attack. The second one hadn't happened. 658 people died at one company alone in Tower 1. Cantor Fitzgerald, America's leading bond brokerage firm, which occupied floors 101 through 105 atop the North Tower. No company was more devastated than this one. They lost the most employees. But you know what? CEO Howard Lutnick wasn't at work that day. Not in the office. That was quite true with a lot of the brass that worked in both towers. Very interesting, don't you feel? There were 1,762 New York residents who died, too, in our surrounding area there, as well as 674 Jersey residents. And finally, one New York firefighter was killed by a man. That was the number that was in the number of the first tower. And in the first tower, 1,402 died. One of those people was the man who jumped. They now call him the falling man. There weren't many who jumped. There was one. And one New York firefighter died because that man who jumped off the top floors of the Twin Tower, First Tower, North Tower, landed on him and killed him dead. No one ever talks about that. It was a hellhole with the authorities going, it's okay. Everything's fine. Until they couldn't do that anymore. Then they said evacuate, it was too late. They wanted more dead than they had gotten. They wanted to kill as many as possible because that's what happens in a terrorist attack. You want to kill as many as possible in one area. There were 125 civilians and military personnel killed at the Pentagon. 1,609 people lost a spouse or partner on 9/11, and more than 3,051 kids lost parents. While it was mostly Americans who died in that attack, there was also 327 foreign nationals in the Pentagon. 327 foreign nationals. Over 37 countries were involved here. Germany, France, Ghana, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, India, Indonesia, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Jamaica, Japan, Jordan, Lebanon, Lithuania, Malaysia, Mexico, Moldavia, Netherlands, New Zealand, Panama, Nigeria, Philippines, Portugal, Poland, Russia, South Africa, South Korea, Sweden, Taiwan, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, United Kingdom. Venezuela even had one dead. So you see, a truly global event affecting the world, because every Illuminati event has to be global. It must include everyone, as does the global financial crisis, as does the global war on terrorism. Those are the numbers from the event. The deaths. The number 11 in 9/11 is predominant everywhere, almost everywhere. There are actually 39 inlaid 11s into this event. The date 9/11. 9 and 1 and 1 are 11. September 11th has 9 letters, 2 numbers. 9 plus 2, 11. The number 911 is the international telephone number for emergencies. September 11th is the 25th day of the year. I'm sorry, did I say 25th day? 254th day of the year is September 11th. And 254, of course, adds up to 11. After September 11, there are 111 days left to the end of the year. The first plane to hit the towers was American Airlines Flight 11. American Airlines starts with A's. A is equal to 111. Airlines, AA. American Airlines is 811. 4 of the hijackers on American Airlines 11, the 011, had the initials AA for their names. The 5th American Airlines 811 hijacker was the pilot, named Muhammad Atta, 11 letters, and AA in his last name. And how about this? As that World Trade Center rubble was being cleaned up, and what we're told melted those buildings was the incredible heat of the fire that was inside, melted steel, yet Muhammad Atta's driver's license made of paper was found at the site, unburned. Flight American Airlines 11 had 92 people aboard. 9 and 2 is, of course, 11. Flight American Airlines 11 had 11 crew members, 2 pilots, 9 flight attendants. The target of Flight AA-11 was New York City, 11 letters. The state of New York was the 11th state added to the Union of the United States. The Trade Center is 11 letters. Skyscrapers is 11 letters. World Trade Center Towers is 22 letters, 2 times 11. The World Trade Center Twin Towers standing side by side look like the number 11. The World Trade Center Towers are each 110 stories high. Drop to 0. You have 11. The North Tower of the World Trade Center was the first to collapse. It fell at 10:28 a.m. 1, 2, plus 8 is 11. The first fire unit to arrive at the World Trade Center Towers, New York Fire Department, Unit 1. Unit 1 lost 11 firemen. The plane that hit the Pentagon was United States Airline Flight 77. 11 times 7. Flight 77, 65 aboard, 6 and 5, 11. The target of the Flight 77 was the Pentagon, 11 letters. One of the walls of the Pentagon collapses at 10:10 a.m. I don't have to tell you what that adds up to. United Airlines Flight 93 crashes at Pennsylvania Field at 10:10. Another 10:10. Drop the zeros. They're 11s. According to the FBI, earlier terrorists originally planned to hijack 11 planes, we're told. 30 days after the attack, the FBI releases a most wanted terrorist list with 22 names, a double 11. Muhammad, the prophet of the Muslim faith, died at 632 AD. 6, 3, and 2 are 11. The Taliban's Manual of Afghan Jihad, Holy War, is 11 volumes. 119 is the area code of Iraq and Iran. 119 is in 11. That's also a backward 9/11. The League of Arab States is comprised of 22 Arab nations. 2 times 11. The suspected base of the terrorists is Afghanistan. 11 letters. Osama bin Laden's birthplace, Saudi Arabia. 11 letters. Ramzi Youssef, convicted of orchestrating the 93 World Trade Center attack. 11 letters. President of the United States, George W. Bush, at that time. 11 letters. Independence Day in the United States, July 4th. 7 and 4 is 11. And the September 11 attacks were not the only plane crashes related to Osama bin Laden. In 1968, Osama bin Laden's father, Mohammed Awad bin Laden, died in a plane crash. Osama, born in 1957, at his father's death, was 11 years old at the time. Osama's oldest brother, Salam bin Laden, then took over the family business. 20 years later, in 1988, Salam also died in a plane crash. The plane that crashed was a BAC 111. The worst terrorist attack event in Spanish history happened at the Atocha train station in Madrid, if you'll remember, at the center of that city during the morning rush hour on March 11th. Exactly 911 days after the World Trade Center attack. It's now known as Spain's 3/11. I'm going to return in a moment. And when I do, let's get into it. how it was done. That's next on A View from Space on AM 640. With coverage of the 10th anniversary. Same story, 10 years later on 9/11. I'm Space, and I'm just getting started.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the rights to free speech while he still can, on AM 640.
Yeah, I wonder how long that'll last for. The way things are going, do you feel safe yet? Well, maybe we ought to take some of those guys that aren't getting with the program off the air. Hey, maybe, just maybe, if you don't think the way the rest do, you should shut up. It's a Spaceman, AM 640, and A View from Space. The 10th anniversary, as you can tell, hits me deeply. This is one of the reasons I was taken off the air and put back on. More than once. More than twice. More than 3 times. So magic is the pretended performance of those things which cannot be done. Let me tell you that again. It's a lot to take in. Magic is the pretended performance, not real, of those things which cannot be done. You cannot knock down 2 buildings in the United States' biggest city without getting found out, and do it successfully before you do it. You have to be allowed to. The success of a magician's simulation of doing the impossible depends upon misleading the minds of his audience. This, in the main, is done by adding to a performance, details of which the spectator is unaware. I'm here to reveal the magician's trick this evening. I'm going to show you where the rabbit is, not in the hat. It's in the bench below the hat. The coin did not disappear into thin air. It went behind his ear. The thing that he's pulling out of his mouth was in his sleeve. Details of which the spectator is unaware. And leaving but others, that is, other details of which they believe you have not left out. So, it's done, magic is done by adding to a performance details of which the spectator is unaware and leaving out others which they believe you have not left out. In short, a performance of magic is pretty much a demonstration of the universal reliability of certain facts of psychology. There are many ways of hiding the truth. Substitute information, omit information, scramble the information out of sequence, add nonsense, random garbage. All 4 methods were used on the 9/11 incident, the Illuminati event of events so far. Because there's more coming. Do you believe for a moment there isn't? I believe the next one, possibly target Chicago, nuclear. Not giving a timeline, just that for now. Predictive programming is what tipped me off to that possibility. More on that on future shows, if there are any. Spaceman, AM 640, and A View from Space on Talk Radio, AM 640. So, as I say, there's many ways of hiding the truth. You substitute info, omit information, scramble it, put it out of sequence, which is what they did in 9/11. And adding nonsense. Let me lay out the clues and show you where they lead. First clue. A very few number of passengers on the 4 flights. Many have remarked about the shortage of passengers. The short passenger list on the 4 9/11 jets. You might get a low turnout for a 767 or a 757 now and then, but these are big aircraft. They'll seat almost 290-some people. But 4 coast-to-coast flights taking off from the east side of a few minutes of each other, all with short passenger lists. Right. That's your first clue. Second clue, first report of first World Trade Center crash. The second clue comes from the first New York eyewitness on NBC. Eyewitness now. She had no question about what she saw. She could hear it. You could hear it as she spoke, in her voice. If she was the state's witness, though, the defense team would have their head between their knees going, "Oh my God, oh no, don't say that," before she stopped talking. What did she say? You mean you forget? She heard an airplane, she said, coming in low and looked up. She then said, "I saw a small private jet and watched it fly into the first World Trade Center tower, the North Tower." She was certain in her description. Most people know the difference between a big round-nosed commercial jet and a smaller plane, don't they? In this testimony, before the Senate Arms Committee on October 25th, 2001, NORAD Commander Ralph Eberhardt said of the first September 11th report, "We were told it was a light commuter plane. It didn't look like that was caused by a light commuter plane." Later, some dodgy report came in from an anonymous source in the United Airlines command center that American Airlines had a hijacking, and they gradually padded the story out until the viewer, the person watching television, felt like he was part of an unfolding revelation on the size and the make of the plane. So the first eyewitness's story got shellacked. Really shellacked. They were plants, planting the psychological thoughts in people's minds. Third clue, Pentagon crash. The first report on NBC said there had been an explosion near the Pentagon heliport. No mention of a plane or anything. It's the same thing with the first hit on the North Tower. There was no plane mention. No person eyewitnessed an aircraft hitting the building in New York City. That was shown to you on television only. Magical television. It was real on your television seeing the aircraft, but if you were there in person, there was none. Shocking, I know, isn't it? Keep listening. Or if you're laughing right now, might as well flick it off. Because you know what? I'm going to convince you I'm right. Better get out of here. Because we don't want you thinking that maybe the authorities, the people that are running this world, are really the ones in charge of all of this global financial crisis, global terrorism stuff. Because they sure bought it and are selling it hook, line, and sinker. Third clue, Pentagon crash. First report on NBC that said there had been an explosion in the Pentagon heliport. No mention of a plane. Now, if you're watching ABC, the first reports cited eyewitnesses who said a business jet had crashed into the Pentagon. Notice that this description is similar to the first report that was reported of a small commuter plane hitting the World Trade Center tower first tower. A small plane, not a big, round-nosed passenger jet. Because, you see, what actually hit the Pentagon was, in fact, not an aircraft, but a missile. Then ABC interviewed some media executive who said he saw the whole thing. Are you ready? A media executive works for ABC. Strangely, you'll find all of the eyewitnesses and all the people that were first-hand with the information and first on were all media people. This is a media executive on ABC. He was the first one to say, saw the whole thing. from his car on the freeway. It was an American Airlines passenger jet. Good luck the road didn't need his attention while he was gawking. And, of course, it was a big passenger jet, scraping the light poles with its belly as it came in low, he said. And that story paved the way for the official story that came out later. Fourth clue. No Boeing 757 debris at the Pentagon crash site. I repeat, no Boeing 757 debris at the Pentagon crash site. They had a great big tarp over the place where it hit, if you'll recall, when the television cameras arrived. The tarp was already covering it up, and the lawn was pristine outside in front where the supposed 757 barreled into that building. By now, lots of people have realized there is something very wrong with the story of Flight 77's crash into the Pentagon. What's the problem? Well, just the whole. I mean, let's start at the basics. The wingspan of a 757 is about 125 feet long, with about 35 between the two jet engines. 35 feet. The hole left by the missile that hit the building was 70 feet across. So how can you tell me a 757 with a wingspan of 125 feet with about 35 feet between the two jet engines, leaving a 70-foot hole in the Pentagon? After the smoke died down, everyone could see the Pentagon, but no one could see the plane. The Pentagon is made of masonry, limestone, not steel and glass. The aluminum wings of the plane should have ripped off and should have been left outside of the building. We should have seen wing wreckage on the lawn, or a tail section on the lawn, but there was none. Same exact thing with watching the aircraft on the South Tower, and I'll get to it deeper into the show, where the footage on YouTube, the one that was showed on television that only Fox got, had the airplane actually folding into the building. The wings never broke off at all. They just melted into the building. And you know it was Photoshop. It came out the other side. I'm going to have the actuality, the report on Fox television that actually tells you, God, the plane came out the other side of the building. And I'm going to tell you how Fox inlaid that jet into their footage. Because Fox was the only one that disseminated those pictures. Fox was the only one that had a plane going into a building. And everyone picked it up. Everyone. I'm talking about Rupert Murdoch here again, Mr. News of the World, one more time. You know he's there, darling. The Illuminati darling. Rupert Murdoch's Fox News gave the very first footage that morning of aircraft going into the building. So everyone went, oh my God, there it is. Because seeing's believing. Remember how I started it off? Magic is what? Recall? Magic is the pretended performance of those things which cannot be done. The magician's success is based on his simulation of doing the impossible, depending on misleading the minds of his viewer. That's what they did to you. When I come back, when I return, a little deeper look into the television footage and more clues on how 9/11 was done. And then I'll reveal Fox's magic. It's a view from space on AM 640 Talk Radio. Back in a minute.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with a view from space on AM 640.
I'm the guy they call Space. This is a view from space on AM 640. I communicate through email space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. This... Occasionally, I get an email that touches me very deeply. And this is one. KS writes, Spaceman, my sister was an American Airlines Flight 11 passenger. How do you explain her disappearance? How can you say it didn't happen? But KS, I'm not saying your sister didn't die and disappeared. She just didn't die the way they're telling you. And that's coming up in the show because they unloaded all of the people. Remember the low passenger lists on all 4 flights? They could all fit on one plane. Let me take it in the timeline, though. KS, I know you'll stay with me. Trust me. I'm not a showboater. I do not want to be a star. All I want is the truth. And when there are questions that are being... I haven't even finished my first hour, and there's incredible questions that have not been answered. And all they ever do is they never try to answer the questions of why 2 buildings would fall in their own footprint as if they were pulled, as they say in the demolition business, set up to fall into their own footprint. How could that possibly happen even just once? Let alone twice, with the same trick. Put an airplane on the top of it and it all falls down into its own footprint. Garbage. It's a damn lie. How can you swallow that? There's no way in the world that could ever happen. And if they were real terrorists, wouldn't they want the thing to fall down sideways anyway and kill as many as they possibly could in Manhattan? Wouldn't it be a great deal if it fell sideways down and went up the street for 110 stories? Instead of in its own little spot. Do you know what's right across the street from the World Trade Center Tower? And what's across the street? The NASDAQ. And the NASDAQ never closed. Oh, yeah. One more. I make mistakes occasionally. And they're really stupid little ones. Space. E.W. writes, it wasn't Mark Kelly they murdered, but David Kelly. See, that's just the whole thing. Here's a guy who understands the story. I got Mark Kelly mixed up with David Kelly because Mark Kelly just happened to be the commander in the space shuttle, the final Atlantis. I've had him on my mind for a while. Gabrielle Giffords, the lady who took the headshot in Arizona. Her husband has a twin brother. If you've listened to the past shows, you know where I'm at with Mark Kelly. And yes, speaking as honestly as I could, I took David out of there and put Mark in, okay? But it was David Kelly. But he was still murdered. This doesn't change the point if his name was Mark Grace or Philip Elliott. It doesn't matter. This guy was murdered because he didn't believe there were weapons of mass destruction by Saddam Hussein and was adamant that he was going to prove it and probably spill the beans and mention names. He saw what was coming and they went, get rid of this guy. So, conveniently, he committed suicide for them. How cool is that? Those guys so lucky, huh? I guess. I don't know. Is that the way it goes? All right. I've studied the television footage taken by different networks. Believe me, I have no downtime. I have no play. I work. You know why? Because I want to get it right. That's why little small mistakes like David and Mark bother me. And emails like Catherine Sears choke me up. So I've studied the television footage taken by different networks, reviewed photos from news magazine published just after 9/11, because that's when you want to catch it, right at the very beginning, because after a while they start to really color it and really get it going, and then all of a sudden what surfaces, hey, I got pictures of airplanes going into the World Trade Center towers. Here they are. Here's my amateur photo. Yeah, right. You would think if someone had those, they would be into the television studios, to the authorities, in a split second. Why you have to wait months for these things to surface? Why? Because they're working on them in the back room. There is so much deception out there, disinformation. Know the difference between misinformation and disinformation? Misinformed means, gosh, I told you to be here at 5 o'clock, but it's actually 4, and I didn't know, I misinformed you. Sorry, I forgot that it was that. But disinformation, I tell you here to be here at 5, and I know that you should have been here at 4, and I wanted to make you an hour late. That's a big difference. Disinformation knows the truth, lies anyway. Misinformation, an honest mistake. David Kelly, Mark Kelly. Misinformation, not disinfo. So I said I've studied it all from the very, very beginning. After the smoke died down, no Boeing 757 debris was visible. Okay? I suspect that inside explosives were used in the Pentagon on 9/11, or a missile. I believe it was a missile. And the damaged section of the building had just been renovated. So, not only a missile could have gone in there, and it did, but they also could have had explosives in there, easy to install. They were renovating it. And wait till you hear who the guys were that were working on that renovation. The same group that cleaned up the Pentagon mess. The same group that was involved in the World Trade Center destruction of criminal evidence. In other words, the cleanup at Ground Zero. There were people from Canada that went down that were going to help out. As good neighbors as we were. We went down there, you know what they told us? Go home. Don't want you. You're not allowed on the site. Because there were only a certain few people could see inside that and do that cleanup. Wait till you hear where it all went. If you don't know about it, keep it on AM 640, A View from Space, Dog Radio. I'm telling you, I will reveal it. Fifth clue. Quality of pilots in Pentagon crash. Flying instructors who trained the suicide pilots of Flight 77 said they were hopeless. It was like they had hardly even driven a car, one of them said. The flight instructors called the two dumb and dumber and told them to quit taking lessons. Those are the guys that trained, or supposedly trained, the terrorists to fly 757s and 767s. Pretty big clue for me. I don't know. I just can't go for the emotion. I want answers to those questions before I go for the emotion and go, oh my God, it's happening. How do I feel about that when I see those images again? Oh, that's what we did all week. What about cold, hard, clear answers that stick, that are sound, that answer questions? Why don't they want to answer the questions? How can you just postulate a theory that two twin towers would collapse in their own footprint? Luckily, when they were hit by a couple of airplanes, one above the 78th floor and one above the 93rd floor, and they pancaked. I gotta have an answer before I start going and buying the emotion and feeling like I gotta go kill a whole bunch of people on the other side of the world that believe in Islam. Give me answers first. Don't just hoodwink me. Don't just magically mix me up with your psychology. You give me straight answers. I can make up my own mind. So something's wrong here. No Dumb and Dumber are expert pilots. That's your fifth clue. Sixth clue, transponders turned off. As you point out, the hijackers turned off the transponders, which transmit information showing the airline names, flight numbers, altitude, but the FAA also uses conventional radar. Did you hear me? The FAA uses conventional radar, so the hijackers must have known the planes were still visible. Why would the hijackers shut the transponders off then, you ask? You're looking at another clue. And here's the seventh clue. Confusion on radar tracks. Some of these flights disappeared from the conventional radar scopes. Also, Second World Trade Center tower barely hit. Have a look at the footage of the Second World Trade Center tower being hit. The plane almost misses the tower and just manages to hit the corner. Yet, after the next day, when we've got the chroma keyed airplanes inserted into videos, the first plane that hit the World Trade Center hits dead center. That's your eighth clue. So, Ghost Flight 175. The jet was actually superimposed into the television picture by Fox News. They got over a 30-second delay on television. The operator has 30 seconds to place anything he wants, any image he wants, to mat it over, just like at the baseball game. You watch baseball, you see the center field camera shooting to the batter, and there's ads on the back of the backstop at lower, behind the catcher and the umpire. Those things change. They're superimposed. But they look like they belong there and are a permanent. But if you watch in the fifth inning, it's changed. They're different. It's the same thing when you watch football. And they put down the lines on the field. They're superimposed onto the field of where the first down should be, where they got to get to. You're looking at another clue on how Fox did it. They had 30 seconds to plant an aircraft into a live shot. At this radio station, I do technical production. Many times, I've hit what we call the dump button. Because what was said is not airable, or we could be sued. I have 15 seconds to react. Television's got 30. I change the sound when I want on what's being emitted. Magical. Cut it out before you get to hear it. Never gets to the transmitter. Stop, because I'm the gatekeeper. Well, on television, you can show all kinds of things that aren't really happening. All your movies are that. You're so brainwashed, so conditioned to watching movies. You watch a newscast, they say it's a newscast, it's a propaganda cast, and they're showing you a movie. Or the way they make movies, and passing it off as real. And we go for the emotion and buy it and don't wait or demand answers. It's too late now. We should have demanded answers long ago. It's finished now. The job's done. The trail's even more confused and conflicting reports, such as, did the president really see the first tower hit on television like he said? Oh, there's so many anomalies. Because when you catch them, at first blush, you can see the mistakes. Small, but glaring. Space back with more in a moment on A View from Space. It's Talk Radio, AM 640.
He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm a guy that calls Space. It's A View from Space on AM 640. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. BE writes, noticed on 640 poll, we have a poll that we run on our website. If you're listening to me right now via the streaming audio on 640toronto.com, the website, you'll see the poll there too on the front page. And right now it sits, as my emailer describes it, 25% think it was an inside job only. How accurate is this, he asks. Also, could you comment on controlled demolition, which I believe for many years was used? Thanks for standing for truth, BE. So if you'd care to, it doesn't matter to me, because I know I actually predicted that it would go into the 80s, high 80s or low 90s no, it was not an inside job on our website poll. Because you know what polls are? Polls are mind manipulator. They are for, you know, those people that go with the flow, don't think independently, won't ask questions. Just, what's everybody else doing? Oh, okay, I'll do that. So what's everybody else believing? Okay, I'll believe that. That's what polls are. Those are for those wishy-washy reeds in the wind who go, oh, well, I want to say that, like, I'm in the minority. So I want to be along with everybody else. I want to fit in. So, no, it wasn't an inside job. And you buy the whole terrorist bit. Because if you buy this whole global war on terrorism thing, guess what? Do you know what you're actually doing? You're actually aiding and abetting and helping us get closer to World War III. Because that's where they want to go. They want to go there. So they call the Arab Spring. You see what's happening in Egypt? I told you the very night that they were cheering and screaming and going, wow, we won, we're going to get democracy in Tahrir Square in Cairo. Well, now they're all protesting against the military rule there. You know what the rule was before? Military rule. Nothing has changed. The only problem is Egypt no longer has a friend of Israel. Israel is now being surrounded by enemies and will be demonized. Wait till the Palestinians march on the United Nations and ask for a state later this month. I'm telling you, it's all heating up, and they want to cause World War III. And there is no Arab Spring wanting democracy. Not at all. When Libya is finally decided with this new government, guess what? They're going to be anti-West also. It's the Brotherhood of the Snake. NATO is on the same side as Al-Qaeda. It's the Brotherhood of the Snake. One pitted against the other, but are brothers in arms to take this thing to where they can convince everybody in the world that the system no longer works and they have to change it and a new one has to come. A new world order is in the offing. By the way, did you know, because I did a lot of checking, like I say, no downtime, just work. The air traffic controllers work for the FAA on the radars, screens. The air traffic controller who handled Flight 11, North Tower hit. Flight 175, South Tower hit, we're told. Also handled Egypt Air 990. That was the one that went down in the Atlantic. He handled that aircraft also. Same guy. I also found out that not only he, but before he came on the scene, this air traffic controller that handled Flight 11 on Flight 175 to New York to hit the towers, supposedly, who also guided Egypt Air 990. The superintendent, the superior of the entire air traffic control room, came in and relieved the younger guys of their duties that morning of September 11th. So the correct people were in place on the radar controls in the FAA. Incredible, isn't it? What you find out if you care to look. Now, is this all too much for you to swallow? Because I'm just getting started. Don't you believe people would conspire to pull this off? Look at the stakes. This current war. It'll go on for years. And it's going to blot out the three monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, Islam. They're going to legitimize military rule, and they're going to redistribute the world's oil resources and jobs and wealth, and change the entire power structure of planet Earth. And all that's needed to make it happen is ambition, black magic, and a few bad men, and a global population that's willing to be deceived. Are you one? It didn't seem real. There are thousands of these steel beams that just fell like pickup sticks, John Albanese quote, volunteer firefighter, amateur photography. This is how the official story is explained by the authorities on the free fall collapses of the World Trade Center Twin Towers, September 11, 2001. An airplane impact weakened each structure. An intense fire thermally weakened structural components. They're still sticking to the story. It's only a theory, they call it, but they're sticking to it. And this fire that thermally weakened structural components may have suffered to damage to fireproofing materials, causing buckling failures, which in turn allowed the upper floors to pancake onto the floors below. Yeah, right. A lot of people just accepted this absurd story of two planes hitting, exploding, melting the steel, and the two towers with the heat of the burning fuel and planes. Had it fallen to their own footprints. Both towers. Didn't do it just once on luck, but twice. Space back with more in a moment. Going in depth, deeper than a black hole on 9/11 on AM 640.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
We got to call Space. You can email me, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I got TP right now. I totally feel your frustration of having people chastise you for being a conspiracy nut. It drives me crazy sometimes, all the ignorance and blindness of so many people that they continue to listen to mainstream idiots who only repeat what they are told to parrot, so that then the public will go out and be the regurgitators to the repeaters who parrot the same thing over and over and over again to total insanity. I have now been posting on MSM sites that the people working for these outfits are accomplices to out-and-out murder and nothing else, that they deserve to be in jail or hanging from a rope for treason. Of course, these posts never made it to print on their sites. LOL. Thanks for the information you bring us weekly. It calms me down after a week of almost losing my mind at that total idiocy and disinfo out there. Signed, TP. So as I said before the break, a lot of people accepted the absurd story of how the two twin towers collapsed in their own footprint. So magically, beautifully done that no other damage was done. And a lot of people did accept this absurd story. And then they went back to whatever they were doing. Of course, the sheer repetition of the lies helped brainwash them because, you see, to brainwash, repetition is essential. It's also ridiculous to think that 19 young Arabs, acting on the orders of Islamic extremists headquartered somewhere in Afghanistan, caused 9/11. The Illuminati's collapse theory is so totally flawed. What it was controlled demolition. Only a professional demolition can account for all the facts surrounding the collapse of the World Trade Center North Tower 1 and World Trade Center Tower 2, the South Tower, and the completely overlooked collapse of the 47-story World Trade Center building, number 7, at 5:20 p.m. on that day. That the Illuminati insists changed the world forever. On that World Trade Center building number 7, in fact, do you realize that BBC's video, now on the net, reported Building 7 collapsing, imploding, a full 20 minutes sooner than it did? How did the BBC know it was going to collapse? And why did they report it while it was clearly standing in the reporter's shot behind the girl? That's on the internet right now if you want to look at it. BBC's video of World Trade Center building number 7, reporting that it had collapsed a clear 20 minutes before it actually did. And the girl is standing there with a shot behind her of New York City, and a lot of times they're not even in New York. There's just a picture of New York behind them. Here we go with the matting again. You never know what you're seeing. They don't have to be there. Just got a picture of it in the background, and it makes you look like you're there. They do it all the time on newscasts with reporting from the White House. Here's Dana Bash, and hey, there's a picture behind her. She's in the damn studio. But you go, well, there she is standing in front of the White House. Wow. I guess she's there. Yeah. Seeing's believing, see. So, they actually made a blunder that very day. Like I told you, you've got to be on these things as early as possible, the moment they happen, to catch the little mistakes. There's two things that blow the official account out of what happened right out the window. Just what caused the original tower damage, and did the damage severely weaken the structures? Pictures clearly show a stable, motionless North Tower after the damage inflicted at 8:46 a.m. in the South Tower after its 9:03 a.m. impact. If you look closely at the North Tower, you see minor rather than severe damage in the North Tower and its columns. As a matter of fact, I believe it was the Nadet brothers. Yes, the Nadet brothers. In the clip they show, the camera shows Jules Nadet, the older one, with other workers casually discussing some street work. Nade looks up over his left shoulder, then behind him, as though he is following a sound. The camera follows his gaze, finds nothing at the original location, then quickly moves to a shot of the World Trade Center, visible through another corridor in the surrounding buildings, because he sees on the street below at a faked gas leak, and he accompanies the fireman there. That's why he's doing out on the street this early. So he hears the sound of a plane, he says, then he puts his camera up into the air, and pow! Smack dab in the middle of the frame flies this first airplane to hit the North Tower. Or is it really? Why does he focus on the World Trade Center? How does he know that was the target? In the first frames, we see a puff of smoke from the impact site, no airplane, that grows into a cloud and erupts into flame. After a few seconds, the flame dies down and the smoke dissipates. At that moment, the camera shows the huge S-shaped gash. That's an S-shaped gash in the building, on the side of the World Trade Center North Tower. And the explosion went outward, not inward. Didn't blow inside, as if an aircraft really did go inside, it would explode inside, but it exploded outside. It spit out and not inward. So if the wings of a large jet make that S gash, it wouldn't be an S gash. That gash should be a straight line like the wings of a jet. But more important, if the impact of the jet made the gash should appear at the moment of impact when the camera is first drawn to the building. Instead, it appears after the smoke and flames clears away. Spaceman back with more in a moment. It's a view from space on AM 640. Talk Radio.
The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded. And he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Spaceman AM 640 and A View from Space. You can email me. I've got two addresses, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Oh, I'm not going to tell you which airport it is in the city that I'm broadcasting from, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, but New Zealand. Thank you so much for your email. But I just wanted to read quickly DMs. Because he's got some pertinent information. High Space, regarding why someone would turn off a transponder is because a jet, a 767 or a 757 transponder, would provide information as well as altitude information. The altitude info comes from what they call the Model C, or Mode C rather. Mode S gives indent info, and Mode A is just a position on a map. Changing course might not cause too much alarm. However, a rapid descent would definitely cause ATC to raise the alarm. In any case, an impact with a building like the World Trade Center should have resulted in a shutdown of the airspace of New York City and a scrambling of the Air Force jets, which are supposed to be on standby to protect the nation. It definitely seems like a setup, because you see there were no airplanes allowed in the sky. In other words, it's just like there was no way we want you to talk while this is all happening, so all of the communication devices crashed except for BlackBerry. When 9/11 happened, my person from the one of the airports here in Toronto flies -7s for the United Nations. He says when 9/11 happened, it was a 757 first officer with Royal Aviation, which was absorbed by Canada at 3000 by May of 2011, 3 months before the attacks. That's what he was doing. He was a 757 first officer with Royal Aviation. A man who knows what he's talking about. And I have communicated with him, or he has communicated with me before on the show. So a regular listener who is in the aviation business understands very clearly what a 757 does. And you just heard his view. Thinks it's a setup. Now, building number 7, as I told you, BBC reported the collapsing 20 minutes earlier than it actually did. How did they know it was going to collapse in the first place? Well, everything is run from London, England. All right? She is the lion. The United States is the pup. Building number 7, I don't know if you know this, but it was an emergency command post for New York City mayors to run the city in an emergency, in case of emergency. It was all fortified, bunker, all kinds of controls in it. And I believe it was the control center that imploded the 2 twin towers that were right nearby. That's why they had to pull that building, because all of the evidence of what they had done was in there. And if it collapsed and it was garbage, they could haul it away like the rest of what they took, that all of that information that was just so incriminating, and just destroyed it. It wasn't, 9/11 wasn't even considered a crime zone for a criminal investigation. How's that? For a shocker. So you have to admit, because of the aluminum covers on the columns, each seam uniformly aligned properly across the tower, forming a horizontal dashed line in the facade from end to end. It was a honeycomb-built building with these steel girders. There's just an impact hole, just gaps in perimeter columns, and missing parts of floors 95 through 98 at the opening. The aluminum facade shows no evidence of vertical movement in the columns, telling you there's no wider floor buckling at the perimeter. The aluminum covers attached to the columns also aligned vertically after impact, meaning that separated columns, truly vertical, lining up top to bottom around the hole, there was no horizontal movement or no bending of the columns whatsoever. Photographic evidence for the northeast side of the North Tower showed no wider secondary structural impact beyond the opening in itself, just a little gash. Of course, there was smoke pouring out of the upper floors. The fact that perimeter columns were not displaced suggests that the floors did not buckle or sag, despite missing parts of floors 95 through 98. Photos show no buckling or sag on other floors. If that's true, that tells you that there was very little damage to the core. There was no photos to document what happened within the interior core, and no one was allowed to inspect and preserve relevant rubble before FEMA had it quickly removed. Who, by the way, were in town the night before. Photos don't allow you to see deep into the inside of the building either. In fact, the hole is black and you can't see any flames. We know that the structural core and its steel was incredibly strong, claiming 600% redundancy, making it highly unlikely that the core was severely damaged at impact. There were 47 core columns connected to each other by steel beams within an overall rectangular core floor area, approximately 87 by 137 feet. Each column had a rectangular cross-section of approximately 36 inches by 14 inches at the base, with steel 4 inches thick all around. It was a honeycombed steel facade covered by aluminum. Both towers. That's how they were constructed. And they tapered to a 1/4 inch thickness at the top. Each floor was also extremely strong, a grid of steel, which is contrary to claims that the towers had a lightweight truss system. They didn't. They were strong, extremely strong steel. Guys like Tom Edgar, who supported the official account at MIT, usually argue that the collapse must be explained by the heat from the fires, since steel used in buildings must be able to bear 5 times its normal load. He says the steel in the towers could have collapsed only if they were heated to the point where it lost 80% of its strength. That would be at around 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. He believes that this is what happened, but the fires did not appear to be big enough or intense enough. There was just billowing black smoke and only a few flames. And guess what? The builders of the buildings have stated this publicly. That the two towers, because they outstretched the tallest building in New York City at the time when they were built, to become the largest, tallest standing buildings in the World Trade Center towers were designed to withstand a hit by a 767 jet. Built to withstand it. And now we have two of them that supposedly went down. One by a 757 and one by a 767. The first response by the National Institute of Standards Technology and Federal Technology Agency that works with industry to develop and apply technology measurement standards claims that the wall section above the impact zone moved downward on World Trade Center North Tower 1, but offers no evidence. It does give photographic evidence, though, for a hanging floor slab on the 82nd floor of the South Tower at 9:55 in the morning. This looks minor, though, because there's no sag on adjacent floors, and the integrity of the structure looks intact. The fire looks weak, too, yet the South Tower collapses only 4 minutes later. Without a demolition theory, that fact is pretty damn hard to reconcile. About a dozen of the fragmented ends of exterior columns in the North Tower hole were bent, but the bends faced the wrong way because they pointed toward the outside of the tower. This fact is another hole in the official story. I have to repeat this in case you didn't quite get it. About a dozen of the fragmented ends of exterior columns in the North Tower hole were bent, but the bends were faced the wrong way because they pointed toward the outside of the tower. I told you the explosion went outward, not inward. So how could a plane go into a building and you have everything poking outward? Answer me that, and don't give me the damn emotion about how did I feel that day. God damn it, give me answers. I want answers before I can believe your global war on terror. You've got to give me concrete answers. You can't hide stuff from me. You can't be a shadowy figure in behind giving me little little teases like credible information. One single piece of information. Now we've got the New York City almost damn lockdown. Guys with automatic weapons, cops with automatic weapons are going to be on the streets because of a single piece of information, because credible intelligence says there's another possible attack. And then they the dignitaries trot out the same rhetoric as they did just after September 11th. We can't let them win. We've got to go out about our business as normal, but be vigilant. That's what they told us again this week. Be vigilant. Could happen. Believe me, the next one is going to be a surprise like this one was. Out of the blue. It's not going to be because there's an anniversary. So a possible response would be that, well, yes, an airliner crash would bend a column inward rather than outward, but the force of a jet blast would blast them back outwards. But any inward bends caused by a plane's impact would straighten toward vertical, not reverse the bent steel outward again. So that theory you can chuck out the window too. If you've been thinking about that, trying to prove the official story to yourself. theory of first bent inward by collision, then bent outward by explosion is absolutely ludicrous, ridiculous. But if you installed explosive charges, the kind that demolition experts use, to slice steel as thick as 10 inches, that would explain the perfectly formed crosses found in the rubble, crucifix-shaped fragments of core column structures. God, they loved that symbolism when they had that. They use that over and over and over and over. As a matter of fact, it's one of the iconic symbols, not with just the airplane going into it, but that steel sticking out of the ground, remember? Oh, remember, it's indelibly stamped in your head, as well as the rather neatly sliced steel everywhere. Let me play a clip for you. Let me play a clip of an explosion of the firefighters. And here it is. Go ahead.
Chief Albert Turry told me that he was here after the events that took place this morning. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place. And then an hour after, there was another explosion in one of the towers here. So according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
All right. So there's more. All right. Now I'm using the mass media as a witness. Very rarely do you hear clips on this show because it's usually all the other spin. But these ones were first responses, which are very, very important because there are mistakes made, and some of this stuff will never be heard again, and some of this stuff will be only heard on this show and nowhere else in the entire world. Spaceman AM 640 back in a moment on A View from Space.
Today's headlines than any...
In order for the floor to fall down, thousands of joints would have to break simultaneously. And then if you look at the speed at which this came down, less than 10 seconds, you blink your eye and thousands of joints just popped somehow. The only way you can explain that is with explosives. They had to have had explosives placed all over the floors at the primary joints. And then that would explain how all of the joints broke at such a rapid rate. The debris was crashing from one floor to the next. Debris cannot crash through steel and concrete floors as fast as it falls through the air. And there was no slowing. Explosives had to be breaking the joints ahead of the falling rubble, which is why the top half starts off collapsing slowly and then it starts picking up speed.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the right to free speech while he still can on AM 640.
Also, it's common knowledge that the hole in the west wing of the Pentagon, less than 18 foot in diameter, was too small to fit a Boeing 757 into. But the North Tower's hole wasn't big enough for a 767 either. The alleged wide-body airliner used on American Airlines Flight 11, official tail number N334AA, FAA listed as destroyed. A Boeing 67 has a wingspan of 155 feet 1 inch, but the maximum distance across the hole in the North Tower was only about 115 feet. The wingspan's 155. That's a whole 40 feet too small. The last few feet at the tips of the wings didn't even break through the exterior columns, is the official answer to this one. But the 20 feet on each wing, what happened there? That's too much difference. Especially since aircraft impact holes tend to be 3 times the size of the aircraft, reflecting the fact that fuel-laden airliners flying into the building send things smashing about in a pretty big way. The small size of the holes in both towers casts doubt on the airliner impact hypothesis and favors professional demolition once again. There were no reports of plane parts. Especially wings snapped off in a collision and bounced to the ground on the northwest side of the tower, or northeast side of the tower. But FEMA only reported a few small pieces of the South Church Street atop a World Trade Center building number 5 to the east of the North Tower. There were no plane parts, because there was no plane. Adding to the suspiciously small hole in the North Tower is that some vertical gaps in the columns on the left side of the northeast hole were so short, probably less than 3 feet, not much of a jumbo jet could pass through that kind of a hole. The engines are a special problem, because each engine's enormous and dense. I mean, there's a lot of parts in there, made up of mainly tempered steel, weighing 5 to 6 tons apiece, depending on the model. No engine was ever recovered in the rubble. No hydrocarbon type of fire could possibly have vaporized a 5 to 6 ton jet engine. Vaporization? The huge airliners weigh 82 tons empty. Got a maximum takeoff weight of 193 when they're loaded with fuel. In the case of the South Tower, an engine from UAL, Flight 175, tail number N612UA, an FAA registered as still valid, by the way, has not been recovered, despite the fact that the flight trajectory of the video plane implied that the right engine would miss the South Tower completely. This is the one that was superimposed, matted into it by Fox Television, the only ones that had that picture and disseminated it to the rest of the media. Fox's footage was shown on everybody's television. They did show minor engine parts on the ground, but where did the rest of the aircraft land and the rest of the engines? I suggest the minor engine parts were plants, further contradicting the official account that the beveled edge of the southeast side of the South Tower was completely intact after impact. The government never produced a jet engine, yet claimed it recovered the past part, I told you, of Muhammad Ali. Unharmed. Unburnt in a fiery crash. And a catastrophic collapse of a tower. And God, there's the guy's driver's license. Wow. Cool. Look what I found, guys. And the government has never produced the data flight recorders on the planes. The black boxes. Never produced them. This is a fact unprecedented in aviation history of major domestic crashes. And what about this? Don't you think if 2 buildings imploded on their own footprint from a smashed aircraft into the top of it, you wouldn't have all kinds of studies being made? Every architectural institute in the world would be combing this over, trying to find evidence, trying to find out why, how it did, so they could strengthen it for better. But was there any of that? No, they just cleaned it up, shoved it under the carpet and went, yep, that's it. Those terrorists are rotten. Let's go get them. Yeah, but, don't you guys think you should be investigating how those things collapse? Wouldn't all of the structural engineers be really interested in finding out how come 2 actually imploded in their own footprints with just a minor crash at the top? Wouldn't they want to know? I mean, if I was and I'm an amateur, wannabe architect, I'm fascinated by very, very tall buildings. As a matter of fact, I'm studying now how they'll actually be able to create a mile-high building. But it's very fascinating. But getting back to the World Trade Centers imploding on themselves, if I was a structural engineer, I would have to know. I got to have proof. I want to know what happened. I need to know for my next building. But do you think that happened? Not in your life. More problems with the official theory is the fact that the picture taken of the North Tower hole show no evidence of a plane either. There's no recognizable wreckage of plane parts in the immediate crash site. Well, the issue probably takes us too far afield. The landing wheel assembly that allegedly flew out of the North Tower and was found several streets away could easily have been planted, like I said, by FEMA or other government agents. I've never seen any objective analysis of this wheel assembly, though it would be welcome. In fact, the government has failed to produce significant wreckage from any of the 4 alleged airliners that fateful day that they're hanging everything on, and all of these new laws ripping your freedoms out from under you with this false flag attack. The familiar photo of the Flight 93, the crash in Pennsylvania near Shanksville, shows no fuselage, no engine, or anything recognizable as a plane, just a smoking hole in the ground. Photographers reportedly were not even allowed near the hole. Don't go there, you can't go there. Because you know what? That plane blew up in the air. It was shot down. That's my take. But it's only a view from space. On Talk Radio, AM 640. World Trade Center 1 and Pentagon holes were way too small for what we're told went into them and made them. Photos show the hole in the World Trade Center 2, the South Tower, was too small to have caused the crash of Boeing 67-2. In fact, the South Tower hole is substantially even smaller than the North Tower hole. The next question is whether the fires were hot enough to cause the World Trade Center buildings to collapse. Defending the official account and its clones that try to explain the unprecedented collapses of 3 steel-framed skyscrapers without demolition, heat arguably is more important than structural impact. That's obviously true for building World Trade Center number 7, isn't it? Because there was no alleged airplane impact, but they had to pull it. That's an expression that the demolition experts use to implode a building on its own footprint and then clean up the mess without harming anything near it. First, no steel-framed skyscraper, even engulfed in flames hour after hour, had ever collapsed before. Suddenly, 3 stunning collapses occur within a few city blocks on the same day. My God! 2 allegedly hit by aircraft and the 3rd not. These extraordinary collapses, after short-duration minor fires, made it all the more important to preserve the evidence, mostly steel girders, to study what had happened. On fire intensity, consider this benchmark. A 1991 FEMA report on Philly's Meridian Plaza fire said that the fire was so energetic that beams and girders sagged and twisted, but despite this extraordinary exposure, the columns continued to support their loads without obvious damage in the Meridian Plaza fire in Philly. Such an intense fire causing sagging and twisting steel beams is not the same as what was seen at the World Trade Center towers. Second, severe structure damage to the World Trade Center towers would have required fires that were not only large, but growing throughout the buildings and burning for a considerable period of time. None of these conditions were present. The lack of flames is an indication that the fires were small, and the dark smoke is an indication that the fires were suffocating. Black smoke is from suffocation. It's unburnt carbon. Eyewitnesses in the tower, as well as the police and firefighters, reported the same thing. Third, impact opening 15 floors lower in the South Tower than in the North Tower, where core columns were thicker. So the South Tower fire had to produce more heat to raise the steel temperatures to soften them up, thermally weaken the steel columns. Yet its fires were considerably smaller and 30 minutes shorter in duration. The tower collapsed after burning only 56 minutes. A prime candidate to explain why the wrong tower fell first is that the small dying fire in the South Tower forced the hand of the mass murderers, who decided to trigger demolition earlier than planned in order to sustain the lie that the fire caused the collapse. All done from the World Trade Center number 7 building, the control center for the demolition. Then they pulled that building to hide the evidence. The North Tower stood for another 29 minutes, and its core steel was thinner at its upper stories. That fire I told you about in Philadelphia, where it bent the steel and twisted it but didn't fall, that 1991 Meridian Plaza fire, burned for 19 hours, and the fire was so extreme that the flames came from dozens of windows on many floors. It did not collapse. Fourth, trying to explain away these lies, the latest NIST investigation, conducted by an extended investigation team I'm sure were very, very good Masons. 236 people. Yes, that is another 11. Makes dislodged fireproofing the key on how to explain the collapses. Supposedly, and I quote, the probable collapse sequence. Operative word, probable. The probable collapse sequence for the World Trade Center towers are based on the behavior of thermally weakened structure components. That heavy damage to fireproofing or gypsum board fire protection induced by the debris field generated by aircraft impact. Let me quote them again, because this is their explanation, and you've heard mine. The probable collapse sequence for the World Trade Center towers are based on the behavior of thermally weakened structural components that heavy damage to fireproofing or gypsum board fire protection induced by the debris field generated by aircraft impact. Huh? Huh? Had fireproofing not been dislodged by the debris field, they continue, this team of government-paid experts claim temperature rise of structural components would likely have been insufficient to induce global collapse. Maybe acknowledging the lack of direct evidence for its reasons, the NIST admits that a full collapse of the World Trade Tower floor system would not occur even with a number of failed trusses and connections, and it does recognize inherent uncertainties. In other words, yeah, okay, you caught us in the bullshit. You caught us. But it sounds good. And we're the authorities. And it doesn't matter anymore because it's already done. And we've already got our war on terrorism going. So shut up. Space back with more in a moment. And I won't shut up. More next on Talk Radio AM 640 on 9/11.
As I went up, I remember listening to small explosions on the upper floors, and these small explosions were not coming from the area of the impact. It was coming from lower floors.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Spaceman, AM 640. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Now, that was Mr. Rodriguez, one of the firefighters, first responders that were in the building after the hit and before it collapsed. They all corroborate my planned demolition theory, which isn't really a theory. It's the truth. Not only are there specific defects in the fire collapse theory, because, as I said, the fires were not that intense. And the black boxes never, ever, ever talked about. Digital flight recorders that are put in the airplanes are designed to withstand heat of over 2,012 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour, or a heat of 500 degrees for 10 hours. They're strong little boxes. First tower to be hit, the north blazed for an hour and 40 minutes before falling, collapsing on its own footprint. The second tower, the south, burned for less than 50 minutes, less than an hour, and it collapsed because its inner core steel melted. Oh, it did? Oh, photos show people walking around the hole in the north tower. Have you seen that one? That footage? People actually walked to the hole and looked out. I kid you not. Photos show people walking around the hole in the North Tower where 10,000 gallons of jet fuel were supposedly burning. They would, by official version of the story, be burned to a crisp. After all, they claimed it was hot enough to melt steel, but the women seemed to be looking down to the ground. The NIST response for that also shows a similar photo of the same blonde woman with light-colored slacks looking over the edge of the 94th floor. By the time the South Tower was hit, most of the North Tower's flames had already vanished, burning for only 16 minutes. The fire did not grow over time, probably because it was running out of fuel. It was suffocating. Fire Department, New York, remained under a gag order for a long time, but now you hear them talking. That was quite a while after I recorded those clips. It saved them for a day like today. They were asked they were told not to discuss the explosions they heard, they felt, and they saw. FAA personnel were also under a 9/11 gag order for a while. Even the 9/11 Commission, Keen Zelikow report, acknowledges that none of the fire chiefs believed that a total collapse of either tower was possible. It shocked everyone that day, amateur and professional alike. Yeah, fooled them all. Although some firefighters realized so-called secondary explosive devices were a risk. Fire had never before caused steel frame buildings to collapse except for the 3 buildings on 9/11. Nor has fire collapsed any steel high-rise since then. Fires were small. Building 7 was unharmed by an airplane, but only had minor fires on the 7th and 12th floors of its 47-story steel building structure, yet it collapsed in less than 10 seconds. Well, they pulled that building. It's impossible for hydrocarbon fires like those fed by jet fuel, kerosene, that's all jet fuel is, by the way, kerosene, to raise the temperature of steel close to melting. But professional demolition can explain all of these facts and more. Demolition means placing explosives throughout the building and detonating them in a sequence to weaken the structure so it collapses or folds in on itself. In conventional demolitions, gravity does most of the work, although it probably did a minority on 9/11. That's because the towers were so heavily honeycombed with explosives. Because that's how it was built, crisscrossed pieces of steel. Each World Trade Center building collapsed at virtually free fall speed, approximately 10 seconds or less. Each building collapsed right into its own footprint. Virtually all the concrete, 100,000 tons in each tower on every floor was pulverized into a very, very fine dust, a phenomenon that requires enormous energy and could not be caused by gravity alone. The cleanup workers couldn't even find concrete. It was all dust. Dust exploded out horizontally for a couple 100 feet, as well as other debris at the start of each tower's collapse. Salvage experts were amazed at how small the debris stacks were. The steel beams and columns came down in sections under 30 feet and had no signs of softening at all. Can you believe that? Now, the steel beams and columns came down in sections under 30 feet long. Had no signs of softening. There was practically nothing left except for small sections of steel and a few bits of concrete. Photos and videos of the collapse all show demolition waves, meaning continuous timed rows of small explosions along floors, just as blast sequences would behave. According to a lot of witnesses, explosions were heard within the buildings. You heard a clip. Each collapse had detectable seismic vibrations, just like the effect created in an underground explosion. At the epicenter of each collapse, there was a molten steel pile identical to what would have been generated if high explosives were used, creating hot spots. That's exactly what happened. High explosives were used. Remember, the hot spots smoldered for months. Months. I said months. The hot spots. It was always smoke coming out of that rubble. Recall that? Over and over they showed that. The two hottest spots, World Trade Center 2 Tower, the South Tower, and World Trade Center 7 building, were approximately 1,350 Fahrenheit, 5 days after being continuously flooded with water. That is a temperature high enough to melt aluminum. If you want to bring down towers with controlled demolition, you'll need unimpeded access to the World Trade Center. Also access to explosives. You'll need to avoid detection and the expertise to orchestrate the whole operation from a nearby secure location. That kind of access before 9/11 likely depended on complicity by one or more World Trade Center security companies. These companies focus on access control. And so when you have a security contract, you know the inner workings of everything. So the next question is, who was handling the World Trade Center security back then in September of 2001? It was called Securicom, then later changed to Stratasec. And it was publicly traded and backed by an investment firm, the Kuwaiti American Corporation. George Herbert Walker Bush's youngest son, Marvin Bush, and Securicom, Stratasec later, were in charge of security. Did you hear that? Kuwaiti American Corporation that owned Securicom. The CEO of the company was Marvin Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush's youngest son. George W.'s brother was in charge of security, not only at the World Trade Center, but also at Dulles International Airport and United Airlines during a contract which was set to end September 10th, 2001. His contract was up the day before it collapsed. Marvin Bush ran Securicom. Remember the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center? The explosives went off in the underground parking lot. The Port Authority of New York, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey began its multi-million-dollar, multi-year revamping of security in and around the towers in buildings 4 and 5. Securicom, run by Marvin Bush, was among a few contractors hired to do the upgrade. Yes. George W.'s younger brother, Marvin, and his cousin, Wirt Walker III, were principals in the company and was even in New York the weekend of September 8th and 9th. That's the weekend the two twin towers were closed down in a power-down condition, meaning all electricity was cut off from the two towers. No power flowed through either building. None whatsoever. A power-down, complete shut-off. Because, you see, if you're going to wire it with explosives, you can't possibly risk a spark. And having an explosion on the weekend of September 8 and 9, I tell you, the weekend of September 8 and 9 of 2001, the Twin Towers were shut down in a power-down mode. The official reason for this was that the World Trade Center had to complete a cabling upgrade, a perfect opportunity to plant explosives without detection. That Saturday, that Sunday, the 8th and the 9th, World Trade Center was closed, and the following Tuesday, the buildings imploded in their own footprint, supposedly by a couple of airplanes and a terrorist attack. Space back with more, much more in a moment on A View from Space. Talk Radio, AM 640.
The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
So Spaceman, AM 640, and A View from Space. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. So now you know who was running the security at both towers, September 8th and 9th, on this shutdown, this power down. And the incredible thing is that Securicom's contract was up September 10th, 2001. Marvin Bush, with his cousin, Wirt D. Walker III, were principals in the company. How about World Trade Center Building 7? Why would it be destroyed? A lot of people ask that question, especially since a collapse would arouse suspicion. Giuliani had a secure and sealed bunker on location at the 23rd story of building number 7. A security communications center where the mayor of New York City would go to run the city in case of an extreme emergency. This is where the Twin Tower implosions were detonated, and then this building was also destroyed, along with the evidence, of course, to cover up the crime, just as a murderer might set his victim's house on fire to cover up the murder. Giuliani's undisclosed secret location was perfect, because all the people in that building were evacuated by 9:45 a.m. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming to work. And then at 9:50, the South Tower collapsed. Everybody was out of the building at 9:45. 5 minutes later, the South Tower collapsed. The first tower to collapse. And got hit the last. North Tower, first one to be hit, stands for an hour and 5 minutes longer than the South Tower. The North Tower stood for an hour and 42 minutes. But the South Tower, 47 minutes. Gone. After impact. So if you agree with the official version that the towers fell at free fall speed because of melting of the steel middle core, then listen carefully. A pancake-type collapse with one floor progressively falling onto the floor below is a bad explanation. Progressive pancaking cannot happen at free fall speed. Free fall requires the pulling or removing of obstacles below before they slow the acceleration of falling objects from above. Sequenced explosions do this. In a sequenced explosion, they remove the very bottom, and the floors above them fall directly onto the building's own footprint. This explains why the lower floors did not interfere with the progress of the falling objects above. The pancake theory fails the test. If we put the murder of all of those innocent people, innocent victims, that died in both towers aside for a minute, the only unusual technical feature of the collapse of the Twin Towers was that the explosions began at the top, immediately followed by explosions from below. Building 7 was entirely conventional. It was imploded from bottom up. If the official story on the collapses of the Twin Towers and Building 7, based on the belief that the Twin Towers collapsed through airplane damage and then fires, is totally wrong, and I believe it is, then the 9/11 attack, the war on Afghanistan, the war in Iraq that followed immediately after that attack are also wrong. Simply because the entire official story is hinges on an Islamic fundamentalist extremist named Osama bin Laden, whose goal was to spread Islam throughout the world. It's ridiculous when you think about it. But if everyone believes this absurd official version of the story, very importantly for the Illuminati, momentous political and social consequences will follow, and are following. Big changes could be forced on the people, and are being forced on the people. Freedom's taken away, and a war started. This is just exactly what has happened. Let me just talk a little bit about the Nadi brothers before I move on to actually some of the actualities from the Illuminati-controlled mass media. And I'm going to show you their mistakes that were made. CBS, Fox, you'll hear it. It's coming up. But first I want to talk a little bit about the Nadi brothers. They happen to be following engine number 7, ladder 1 in Lower Manhattan when the first plane of the World Trade Center hit. See, you have to have pictures. All right? You got to have pictures. And this pair were doing a documentary. Happened to be doing a documentary. Professional photographers. Because we don't want amateur stuff here. We want professional stuff because 9/11 is going to be a huge event and we want to have really good, fantastically impactful pictures. Nadi brothers got that for them. Here's how it all worked. They were following engine number 7, ladder 1 in Lower Manhattan. Went to a fake, well, what turned out to be a false gas leak. And that's what brought them out onto the streets, they said, with their cameras. They were following the crew. You see, they were just staying at this fire hall, Jules and Gideon, working on a profile on a probationary firefighter, or a probie in New York City, and his company, Engine 7, Ladder 1. For the project, the Nadi brothers, who are brothers, teamed up with their friend James Hanlon, who's also a firefighter in the company. The company's firehouse is on Duane Street in Lower Manhattan, a few blocks from the World Trade Center. They spent the summer shooting the probie there, an eager 21-year-old named Tony Benetatos. As the summer went on, they gathered hundreds of hours of tape of Benetatos and life in the firehouse. Around 8:30 in the morning, September 11th, the company received a routine call. The fire station, that particular one, received a call to investigate a suspected gas leak at an intersection less than a mile north of the World Trade Center. Jules went on the call, the older one. While there, he heard a roar from above. turns his camera upwards, captures the only video of the first plane supposedly striking Tower 1. This was not shown until day 2, okay, the second day. So it is obviously photoshopped, doctored, because if you look at the original Nod-A film of him putting his camera up into the air, following it at this piece that I'm describing right now, where he hears the sound, his camera goes upwards, looking for the sound, he says, and then he focuses on the World Trade Center building, just puts his camera on it, and then all of a sudden there's an explosion there. You don't see any aircraft go. No aircraft whatsoever in the picture. None. But you do see an explosion. It's incredible footage because the plane is missing. And here he was to capture that wonderful demolition of making that big hole when they fired the explosions off. Nod-A was there to capture the scene. So, of course, these guys were also there when they went and started surviving after the collapse of the towers. And during it, as they were actually collapsing, the Nod-A brothers were on the street filming. But you know what? No gory footage. They said it was all left out for taste because they knew this was going to be shown over and over and over and over. And you can't show blood, guts, and gore and death. All we want is the dust, the people panicking. Give me the emotion. And the Nod-A brothers delivered. There is no better justification than the images captured by the Nod-A brothers for why the United States has unleashed and continues to rain down unshirted hell on radical Islam and its supporters. Do you suppose CBS and NBC got the Jules Nod-A film footage of the North Tower being hit so quickly? Filming a documentary, it's his property and could be sold for millions. But did they? No. They were Masonry belongers, French Freemasonry, together with their brothers of British Freemasonry and American Freemasonry, set this up. All their money and property actually belongs to the secret society, you see. That's what happens when you belong. It belongs to CBS and NBC. That's their footage. And Hollywood. Gideon, the younger brother, does the streets. The older brother went into the North Tower and got the footage in there. He knew it was to be safe. He knew when it was going to implode. That's why he went in and then got out before it did. They captured and recorded for posterity spectacular acts of what they call bravery. What they did was they filmed America in panic mode. And Robert De Niro did the narration on the documentary. There you have your Hollywood connection. And guess who's the master of ceremony tomorrow at the 10th anniversary? Yes, Robert De Niro. But there's one huge difference between a movie and this documentary the Nod-A brothers took advantage of America at its confused, heroic best, is that 9/11 is real. It wasn't shot in a movie set with digital editing or matting techniques. The people are real, not stuntmen. Space back with more in a moment. On A View from Space on AM 640. This is Talk Radio.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with A View from Space on AM 640.
The Spaceman AM 640. Let me delve into the cleanup a little bit. It's just incredible. Wow. You talk about a dirty cleanup. George W. Bush's brother was on the board of directors of the company providing electronic security for the World Trade Center at that time, Dulles International Airport, where the aircraft left from. They ran that, too. And United Airlines, according to public records. The company was backed by an investment firm, I told you, the Kuwait American Corporation, also linked for years to the Bush family. The security company, formerly named Securicom, and then their name changed to Stratosec, located in Sterling, Virginia. Its CEO, Barry McDaniel, said the company had a completion contract to handle some of its security at the World Trade Center up to the day the buildings fell down. Well, I did a little more research and I found out that September 10th, 2001 is the day those contracts expired. It also had a 3-year contract to maintain electronic security systems at Dulles Airport, where the planes left from, supposedly, according to the Dulles contracting official. Securicom Stratosec, also known as Stratosec, also handled some security for United Airlines in the 90s. Now, according to McDaniel, Barry McDaniel, CEO of Securicom, it had been completed before his arrival at the board in 1998. Marvin Bush, the president's youngest brother, George W., the former president's youngest brother, was director of it from 93 to 2001. But the White House had not publicly disclosed Bush's connections in any of its responses to 9/11, nor has it ever mentioned that another Bush-linked business had done security work for the facilities that were attacked. Now, Marvin Bush joined Securicom when it was capitalized by the Kuwait American Corporation. They threw money at it. Private investment firm in D.C. That was the security company's major investor, sometimes holding a controlling interest. QAM, as they're called, had been linked to the Bush family financially since the Gulf War. One of its principals and member of the Kuwaiti royal family, Michal Youssef Saud al-Sabah, served on the board of Stratosec. The managing director at QAM, Wirt D. Walker III, cousin of Marvin, was also a principal at Stratosec. Now, there's your connection to the guys who ran the security there. AMEC, in charge of the cleanup. That's an anagram for Assessment, Management, and Engineering Consulting. They did the cleanup at the World Trade Center. They did the cleanup at the Pentagon. They were also doing the renovation at the Pentagon when it was hit. So, same cast of characters. Concrete turned to powder. Pile of debris 110 feet high. Debris moved to Staten Island. Weeks Marine Salvage Company took the debris to the island on the Hudson River, to a place they called Fresh Kill on Staten Island. That was where they sifted through debris for more bodies after it was hauled off Ground Zero. Then the steel separated from smaller pieces of debris, and that was placed on a conveyor belt and picked up by boats and shipped to China. The evidence of the steel that supposedly collapsed because of intense heat, but not for evidence or not for structural engineers to look at and assess, but to quickly whisk it away. As I said, Canadian men went down to help in the cleanup and they were turned away. You may not enter Ground Zero. No unauthorized personnel, because it was a controlled area for getting rid of criminal evidence. A foreign company headed by a knight of the British Empire managed the controversial cleanup at the rubble in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. That's right, AMEC, a foreign company headed by a knight of the British Empire. Although the terrorist attacks from September 11th were clearly criminal acts of mass murder, no effort was ever made to preserve the integrity of the crime scenes, and the essential evidence was disposed of like garbage. Can you imagine? This is the reason why former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani was made a Knight of the British Empire. It was because he hired 2 large British construction management firms, both headed by Knights of the British Empire, sir, to oversee what many experts consider to be massive criminal destruction of evidence. The editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering magazine, William Manning, issued an urgent call to action to America's firefighters at the end of 2001, calling for a forensic investigation and demanding that the steel from the site be preserved to allow investigators to determine what caused the collapse. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately, Manning said. Did it? No. Because of the guys in charge. See ya. Shut up. Such destruction of evidence, he said, showed the astounding ignorance of government officials to the value of a thorough scientific investigation of the largest fire-induced collapse in world history. Well, Mr. Manning may not understand. This was a conspiracy to bring down a system and replace it with a global system. This isn't astounding ignorance, as our editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering magazine, William Manning, stated. This is a pure, unmitigated cover-up of evidence in a crime to destroy that evidence like they did. For more than 3 months, structural steel from the World Trade Center was cut up and sold for scrap. Chinese bought it. Crucial evidence that could answer many questions about high-rise building design practices. Performance under fire conditions was put on a slow boat to China. Maybe never to be seen again in America. Oh, maybe until you buy your next piece of metal, whatever is made in China. Can you imagine buying something that was made of steel from the North Tower being sold at Walmart back to you? I've looked through the National Standard of Fire Investigation, but nowhere does anybody find any exemption allowing the destruction of evidence for buildings over 10 stories tall. Clearly, there are burning questions that need answers. Based on the incident's magnitude alone, a full-throttle, fully resourced forensic investigation was imperative, but it was never done. 3 months later, the Science Committee in the House of Representatives reported the World Trade Center investigation was hampered by the destruction of crucial evidence. Oh, gosh, dude. You know, with the Air India bombing, you know what the RCMP did? They erased all of the incriminating evidence tapes. Oh, I don't know where those went. Typical. Suckers buy it and swallow it hook, line, and sinker. The Illuminati, mass media, and its message. Some of the critical pieces of steel were gone before the first investigator ever reached the site. The investigation Manny called for never happened, and never will, because the essential evidence is now completely destroyed. Valuable evidence has been lost irretrievably. The FEMA-sponsored building performance assessment that was conducted of what was left of the World Trade Center was just that, an assessment, not an investigation. The World Trade Center disaster demands the most comprehensive, detailed investigation possible. Why? Because of everything that it entails. No event in the history of the entire fire service has ever come close to the magnitude of this incident. You would think we would have the largest fire investigation in world history. But you'd be wrong. We literally treated the steel removed from the site like garbage. Not like what it was, crucial fire scene evidence. Yes, everything was pulverized. Think of thousands of file cabinets, computers, telephones in the towers. I never saw one. Everything was pulverized. The London-based AMEC firm, ranked by Engineering News Record magazine as the world's largest, oversaw the actual management of the debris removal. They're the criminals. Well, they're complicit. They're the guys, the bagmen, as they call them. AMEC was the only construction company working at both disaster sites. The company's website stated even, AMEC was managing Hudson River barging operations to transport the rubble from the entire World Trade Center site, Ground Zero, to a landfill on Staten Island called Fresh Kill. And the steel went to recycling operations in Jersey. Curiously, AMEC was also doing the renovation job at the Pentagon, I told you. And it was called to manage the removal of the debris there in the World Trade Center. See, I want answers there before I move on to, it was 19 terrorists did this. Give me answers there first, please. Start there. Don't give me emotion. Don't ask me how I felt or what I saw, how it affected me. I want answers to hard questions. AMEC co-managed the World Trade Center site with another London-based firm, Bovis Land Lease, from January 2002. Bovis was a troubled construction subsidiary of Britain's P&O, which is taken over by Australia's Lend Lease Corporation in 1999. Sir Frank Lampel, a Czech who emigrated to England at 42, heads Bovis. Lampel, who claims to have been imprisoned in Auschwitz and Dachau during the Nazi era, is also a British knight. Mary Costello, spokesperson for Bovis in New York, said that the company had assumed overall responsibility for the World Trade Center site on January 4th, 2002. She'd never discussed what buildings Bovis had worked on, and her answer was always, "You should not be contacting us. You should be speaking to the New York City Department of Design and Construction." Click. Turner Construction, the third foreign firm, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Hochtief AG, headquartered in Essen, Germany. Turner was never willing to discuss his part that his company played at the World Trade Center site either. Mum's the word for these knights of the British Round Table. Space, back with more in a moment on A View from Space. That's all it is, just A View from Space on Talk Radio. AM 640.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the right to free speech while he still can, on AM 640.
Space, back with more on A View from Space on AM 640. This is Talk Radio. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. MG writes, "Sorry, Space, I may have confused what you said. Are you saying Marvin Bush may have set the explosives to detonate the towers? If so, what's happened to the actual guys that rigged them, this thermite you? It must have been a massive job. There had to be a lot of people doing it." Well, hold on now. MG, I didn't say Marvin Bush set the explosives up. I said he was involved in the security operations at the towers of September 8th and 9th. where they were in a power down mode, which means no electricity whatsoever going into them. Supposedly the excuse was they were laying some cable. But you don't need to shut the power down to lay cable. But you do need to shut power down because you don't want one single little spark whatsoever when you're placing detonator charges to demolish a building, a planned demolition. And it is not a massive job. There are not thousands of people that do this. There are 2 families in the world, one American and one British, that do controlled demolition in large, high-rise, 110-story buildings. 2 families. 2 families. And they pass the information on to their next generation. So these 2 families have been demolishing and have all the science and all of the rules and all of the numbers in their books in their possession. They know exactly what it takes on how to bring down every little single one, because that's what they do. So you see, it's not that hard to have an inside man run the security, have it shut down, and allow the detonators, the 2 families, to do their job, to wire the place hot. Then on Tuesday it come down. As I said, AMEC is an acronym for Asset Management and Engineering Consultancy, according to the company's communications director, Dave Patterson. Oil and gas drilling makes up about 25% of the company's revenue. See, here we are, already in the oil patch with the bushes, right? See, a guy like Obama, would get that done. He don't have that connection. That's not his job. His job is take what's left and write more checks. So, oil and gas drilling, they're in that business. Makes up about 25% of the company's revenue. AMEC also operates North Sea oil rigs for Shell and BP. Oh, you remember BP. They're the same company involved in last year's Deepwater Horizon explosion and resulting oil spill. Yeah. Bad oil. Good solar. Communications director of AMEC, David Peterson, was asked about who was in charge of the cleanup at the World Trade Center. He said the City of New York was the project manager. The director of the New York City Department of Design and Construction, Kenneth Holden, was the person in charge of that. AMEC's London-based chief executive officer is Sir Peter Mason. Wow, what a name. Sir Peter Mason is a knight of the British Empire, the former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, who gave the management to the World Trade Center site to the 2 British firms, AMEC and Bovis, Lend-Lease, received an honorary knighthood in the Order of the British Empire from Queen Elizabeth on February 13th, 2002. Well done, Mr. Giuliani. When Giuliani was made a Knight of the British Empire, he joined an exclusive club, which includes George Bush. That's George Herbert Walker Bush, who is a Knight of the British Empire. So is Ronald Reagan. So is General Colin Powell. So is Wesley Clark, NATO former Supreme Commander, the guy who's always on walking us through the wars on CNN. Norman Schwarzkopf. Stormin' Norman, the guy who did the Iraq invasion. He's knighted. So is Steven Spielberg, because of his wonderful alien movies. And Bush and Reagan were both knighted, as I said, in the Order of the Bath, as well as knights. Here's the original report from just days after the cleanup began. Ground Zero. In the wake of September 11th terror attacks in New York, hundreds of workers swarm over the site of the former World Trade Center as a massive recovery and cleanup effort progresses. Officials anticipate that removing the estimated 1.2 million tons of rubble from the site will take 8 to 14 months, although they hope it'll be shorter. LZA Thornton Tomasetti, the New York engineers firm leading the structural inspection and cleanup at Ground Zero, is working closely with a team of 4 subcontractors hired by the New York City Department of Design and Construction: Turner Construction, Plaza Construction, Boval Lentil Lease, Tully Construction, and AMEC Construction Management. Assisting LZA are many of the major structural engineering firms in New York City, an effort coordinated by the Structural Engineers Association of New York. What was at first a desperate rescue operation has evolved into a focused, round-the-clock endeavor to remove rubble, and quickly and safely. The rubble, plucked delicately from the site by cranes, backhoes, and other heavy equipment, was taken by a barge to Fresh Kills landfill on Staten Island, where it is searched for evidence. Can you believe they actually stated that? And human remains. Much of the structural steel from the Twin Towers will be melted down, recycled through the forensic team assembled at the American Society of Civil Engineers, and hopes to examine steel from the site to gauge its performance during the fires. But it was never done. This is the day of report. These inspections impact future steel designs or fire systems. To date, though, no specific steel specimens had been selected for forensic analysis. They'd like to do it, but haven't got around to it yet. Oh, I talked about the Naudet films just a few moments ago. And if you're watching the 9/11 program shown on television and with the Naudet brothers, if you listen very carefully, you hear Gideon. No, it's the older one. The older Naudet brother say out loud an enthusiastic "yes" just after the first plane had hit the North Tower, or he actually photographed, videotaped the explosion of the North Tower. There was no plane there, but you could hear him going, "Yes!" This program was shown all over the world. Did anyone else hear this? Email me if you did. So evidence that refutes the official explanation for the collapse of the World Trade Center is being kept secret by the U.S. Department of Justice by a flimsy excuse. Immediately after the attacks, the United States Justice Department ordered the contents of the so-called lost tape. Yeah, there was a lost tape of firefighters' voices at the World Trade Center to be kept secret from the public. The reason for the secrecy surrounding the 78-minute audio tape was because it went totally against the accepted official explanation that intense jet fuel fires melted the tower beams and caused the collapses to imprint upon itself. So the so-called lost tape, 78 minutes of audio tape, with the firemen talking to one another, all corroborating what I've been saying. I played you a few clips of it earlier, Rodriguez and Turi, Chief. I wonder who those guys are now. The article that said the firefighters reached the crash zone on the 78th floor, where they went to the aid of badly injured people trapped in a wide area of destruction. The newspaper raised more questions than it answered. It pointed to a reason for the secrecy. Once the firemen got there, they had a coherent plan for putting out the fires that they could see and helping victims who survived. The report names 2 of the firefighters who were at the crash site: Battalion Chief Palmer, who was organizing the evacuation of injured people, and Fire Marshal Ronald Bucca. Both men died in the collapse. In all, 343 New York Fire Department firefighters died on 9/11. And tomorrow, the big 10th anniversary, first responders, not welcome. Oh, and there's no prayer service. Okay, so it's our own little get-together. Bobby De Niro and everybody's going to be there. All the Illuminati buddies. All you little ones, all you little men that don't mean anything, that were just pawns in our scheme. You don't have to come. No, you can't come. It's our event now. We're using it. And we're going to make everyone relive it like it happened yesterday. With our Illuminati-controlled mass media, we're going to play all the sound bites over and over again to make you feel like it was just yesterday. So that we can push our plan forward. Ramp up the war on terror. Yes. They not only set up and wired the buildings to implode them, they also had a very elaborate plan to dispose of the evidence. That's what gets me. On the other side of the break, here's what's going to happen. The Illuminati-controlled mass media is going to hang itself on A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. Mistakes clearly revealed next.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm the guy that calls space. This is A View from Space on AM 640. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I communicate by email. So now I'm going to play you some clips from the Illuminati-controlled mass media, just to show you some errors that were done, egregious errors that were done right out of the gate, right in the outset, September 11th, just after 8:46 a.m. See, when criminals have access to a tool like the mass media, which is able to manipulate public opinion, smoking gun proof of their trickery is sometimes very hard to attain. On 9/11, almost all of the critical evidence was quickly removed. This is except for one critical piece. Many people actually have a recording of it too. Yes. But did they notice? On the morning of 9/11, there were 5 camera shots, 5 views, 5 pieces, snippets of video. We call them clips in the business. There were 5 clips showing the world over. Only 5 that morning. Because you see, remember, the Naudet brothers had the footage that was touched up later that had airplanes the second day. So that's why George Bush is a liar when he said he saw the first plane hit the tower. No one did until September 12th. That's when they showed the Naudet brothers and their photoshopped little piece of work. Remember, the most critical moments to pick up the truth is at the very beginning, as it's happening. Since the only known footage of the first hit, North Tower, the Nade brothers. Not showed till, like I said, the day after. The world seized the second strike on the World Trade Center live. Yes. Here's CNN live that morning.
Okay, go ahead.
I say the whole takes about, looks like 6-7 floors were taken out. And there's more explosions right now. Hold on, people are running.
Hold on just a moment. We got an explosion inside.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll tell you what's going on.
Okay, just put Winston on pause there for just a moment.
See, there's your proof right there. Did you hear him say there was an aircraft? No. You heard him say on CNN there was an explosion. He was an eyewitness to witnessing the explosion only. No plane. Television footage of the second plane flying into the South Tower goes to black precisely at the time of impact. Also, the anchor watching this footage fails to see any plane also. He doesn't say, for instance, "Look, here comes another plane." He doesn't say that. The reporting person on the phone picks up no explosion or impact sound. Now, to CBS and Bryant Gumbel. This is CBS now. You just heard television footage of the second plane flying into the South Tower, and the anchor watching fails to see any plane. He doesn't say, "Look, here's a plane." Now to CBS. Bryant Gumbel used to do football, doing the morning show on CBS, who has his own show. His producer is a Mr. Renault. Guess who's on the phone? It's the producer's wife, Mrs. Teresa Renault. You will hear Bryant Gumbel acting like she's a caller, and he will call her Miss, but he knows damn well it's his producer's wife calling on the telephone from her home to be an eyewitness. Here's the clip.
I understand Teresa Renault is with us right now. Miss Renault, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
This is Bryant Gumbel. I'm down on 59th and 5th. Where are you?
I am in Chelsea, and we are at 8th and 16th. And I would say, approximately 10 minutes ago, there was a major explosion from probably, it looks like about the 80th floor. It looks like it's affected probably 4 to 8 floors. Major flames are coming out of the north side and also the east side of the building, yes.
You're over in Chelsea. Did you hear the explosion from your position?
Yes, we did. As a matter of fact, we heard it, and because I was just standing there pretty much looking out the window, I didn't see what caused it or if there was an impact.
So you have no idea right now?
There's another one. Another plane just hit. Oh, my gosh. Another plane has just hit. It hit another building. Flew right into the middle of it. Explosion. My God, it's right in the middle of the building.
This one into the east tower?
Yes. Right in the middle of the building. And right now, that was definitely looked like it was on purpose.
You saw a plane?
Yes, I just saw a plane go into the building.
There you go. What a bad actress she was, huh? That was just awful acting. That was pitiful. She should be ashamed of herself. And her husband's in the business. Bryant Gumbel wasn't that great an actor anyway, putting on this little charade. Did you notice that she said there was an explosion at the beginning of this clip? She didn't say there was a plane that hit because no one knew there was a plane that hit the North Tower. But then she says, "Oh, look, another plane has hit another building." So, is it possible that she was a plant? Of course it is. You notice there's no mention of an airplane on the first tower hit. She just says there was an explosion. And she heard it. They were just looking out the window, I guess, waiting for it, I guess. Waiting to see it so she could call. And then while she's on the phone, the other one can call. And she blows her line. She said, another plane. Oh, my God, woman. This is not knowing until day 2. You just blew your cover. She didn't see what caused the explosion. But she says, oh, there's another one. Another plane just hit. Oh, my God. Another plane has just hit another building. Now she must have superhuman eyesight, because Chelsea, where she lives with her producer husband of Bryant Gumbel's show on CBS, The Morning Show, is miles and miles from Lower Manhattan, believe me, where the towers were. And there are so many tall buildings between her that there's no way that she could see or hear. Let's be honest. So I guess she's got superhuman ears, too. I can't believe she said that. Now, here's the live broadcast on Fox TV, how this sounded.
As you look at the picture from our chopper now arriving at the scene, Jim Friedel in Hoboken said it appeared to bank sharply and smash directly, perhaps purposefully, into, oh my goodness,
oh God,
there's another one. Oh my goodness, there's another one.
Seems to be on purpose.
Oh my goodness, now it's obvious, I think, that there's a second plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. I think we have a terrorist act of proportions that we cannot begin to imagine.
Oh, there's Fox just ripping it up. Murdoch ought to be proud of them that morning, huh? Doing the job so right, just sounded so natural, and planting that thought in there. Hey, this has got to be a terrorist attack. We're like, what, 4 minutes into the act? Ah, terrorist act. Yeah, we'll call it that right now on Fox News. It's not an opinion, we're reporting fact. The Fox chopper takes video of the explosion. An op has a delay of 30 seconds to put in, insert in, mat in an aircraft. Fox anchors say, oh, it's a terrorist attack. Footage of the first plane hitting the first tower is not showing till the next day. This, what they're watching, is a replay of the matted airplane that was slipped into the television picture. The Fox chopper takes the shot of the explosion. As that's happening, the op is sinking, superimposing the matting of the aircraft to have his nose touch the building as it explodes. It's a timing thing. Hear the clip again.
As you look at the picture from our chopper now arriving at the scene, Jim Friedel in Hoboken said it appeared to bank sharply and smash directly, perhaps purposefully, into, oh my goodness,
oh God,
there's another one. Oh my goodness, there's another one.
Seems to be on purpose.
Oh my goodness, now it's obvious, I think, that there's a second plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. I think we have a terrorist act of proportions that we cannot begin to imagine.
So there you have the setup. Perfect, huh? The Fox helicopter footage is of the towers the first footage used by all the networks to capture the second plane going into the South Tower. You have the shot of the North Tower already smoking. Then there's a fast zoom in. It takes place just as the plane arrives. I've seen it over and over and over in slow motion, backwards, reverse. Incredibly, at the same time as the zoom in, you see a plane hit the tower. You also see the plane coming out of the other side of the building. And you can hear the guys on the clip saying it. You only see it for a split second as the picture fades to black, but you see the nose of the plane coming out of the other side of the building completely intact, because that's what proves it's a superimposing job, or a matting job. He put the aircraft into the picture, but he didn't stop it in time. He was a little late. So you can conclude that this was not a real airplane on the screen. Instead, it was a graphic image of an airplane. So, how did this critical piece of evidence get aired on all of the networks? The Fox Chopper cameraman films the close-up, the explosion that originated inside the tower, and then superimposes the flight path and the airplane. Then in a short time span given by a delayed live television feed, a graphic computer operator inserts a superimposed graphic airplane over the shot as the helicopter shooting the shot drifts left, and the shot he's taking of the World Trade Centers drifts right. You get to see the airplane actually appear to exit the building on the other side, and it wrecks the end of the shot the graphic computer operator superimposed in. They fade to black live just as the nose pokes out of the other side of the building. But the reaction time wasn't fast enough by the operator. The fade to black happens 0.28 seconds too late. Here's the clip of them saying, "Hey, on the other side of the building." This is clip number 4. It says, "Hey," the nose pops out the other side of the building. You can hear him say it. Listen.
As we were watching the live picture here in the studio, we saw a plane crash into the other tower of the World Trade Center. And again, let's just to be sure, there it is. There it is. The plane went right through the other tower of the World Trade Center.
That is a very hard thing to watch.
Isn't that incredible? See, went right through. That means they saw the nose on the other side completely intact. Now, how could a nose of an aircraft be completely intact after it goes through, supposedly goes through a building? Well, the answer is it can't. So I'd have to have that question answered also, on why they could see that and why that actually appeared there. In other words, let's get the video evidence, look at it, and let's get some experts to tell us what happened. Well, guess what? I'm the expert. You're the expert. The experts are pushing the official version and bend and twist it to fit. Space, back with more in a moment. It's View from Space. This is AM 640. Talk Radio.
The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Spaceman, AM 640, and A View from Space. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. This Fox Chopper I was just speaking about has a long shot also of the Twin Towers before the impact of the second plane. They hold this long shot for 5.5 seconds, and you can see no plane anywhere in sight. They hold it for 5.5 seconds on the burning Twin Tower. This is a plane on the way, supposedly, the second plane. They hold this shot for 5.5 seconds. Fox Chopper in the air. where everybody got their footage from. And you can see no plane anywhere in sight in the sky. Nowhere in the sky anywhere is an aircraft. But as soon as the zoom in occurs, pop, all of a sudden, like black magic, there's a plane appearing right there, just about to smash into the building. My God. I'm serious about this. There has to be answers. It's ridiculous. You have a 5.5 second shot of the Fox chopper with a long shot. Takes in a lot of sky. 5.5 seconds they hold it. Then they do a zoom in. And as soon as they do the zoom in on the building, there it is. The airplane like appears magically out of nowhere, just feet from the building. Pow, it hits. There's the aircraft appearing right there, just about to smash into the building. There's a very curious gap, too, between the official impact time of 903.11 seconds and the scientific seismic data impact of time of 902.54 seconds. The difference between the official impact time of the supposed airplane and the scientific seismic impact time is 17 full seconds. The live broadcast was delayed by exactly that same amount of time when they superimposed in. It took him 17 seconds. I told you he has 30. He used 17 of them to put his plane in. And that's why there's a gap between the official impact time of 902.54 seconds and the actual scientific seismic impact time. A difference of 16 seconds. Enough time to keep a shot or delete a shot, but not enough time to double check it. So the mistake went on the air, and many hundreds of thousands of people have a copy of it. Probably millions by now. In fact, after double-checking the Fox chopper nose in, nose out footage, CNN showed the clip 6 minutes later. What they just saw was the Fox chopper shot. You heard the anchor say the plane went through the building because they saw the nose pop out the other side. If a crime were committed and immediately afterwards an expert appeared on the scene claiming facts that no one could have possibly known about, you'd have serious questions about this person, wouldn't you? Let me ask you that question again. If a crime was committed and immediately afterwards an expert appeared on the scene, claiming facts that no one could have possibly known about, because it's so quickly after the fact, you'd have serious questions about this person, wouldn't you? Well, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, this is precisely what happened. Let me point to you exactly how the official story was planted into the public consciousness. Just as soon as the buildings were hit, the cover-up actually began. First with the so-called eyewitness, the Fox News eyewitness. Their stories were prepared for them in advance. Here's one of those planted eyewitness accounts from Fox News.
Come out of nowhere and just scream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
Oh, man, this guy is so fast, so intelligent, so quick to just assimilate all of that knowledge into the exact answer that's required. Oh, yeah. I got to hear that guy again. He was like a professor at a university just proving his point here. I mean, this is just like moments after the impact of the buildings. Go ahead.
come out of nowhere and just scream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
First of all, how did he know all of that? Supposedly it was just some guy on the street Fox News interviews. And second, at the time of the interview, the North Tower had just collapsed. Just collapsed. Even though the North Tower was hit first, the South Tower, even though the fire was less intense, collapsed first. This interview was done live at just after 10 a.m. that morning. The second tower came down at 9:50 a.m. I mean, even firemen and engineers didn't understand the collapse. But incredibly, this eyewitness, this Fox News eyewitness, this guy who just happened to be interviewed by Fox News moments after the collapse, does. All of a sudden, he's putting out the very first hints of the Illuminati lies. What would follow? Structural damage from intense heat. Collapsed the two buildings in their own footprint. One, it took only 50 minutes. That's quick melting. South Tower, 50 minutes to collapse. Everybody else is in a state of total shock and confusion, but not this guy. Unbelievable, isn't it? But that's how journalism is done these days in the Illuminati-controlled mass media. Now let's go to CBS broadcast that morning with Dan Rather with his guest expert, Jerome Auer. This is Jerome Auer with Dan Rather. CBS 1.
Based on what you know, and I recognize we're dealing with so few facts, is it possible that just a plane crash could have collapsed these buildings, or would it have required the sort of prior positioning of other explosives in the building? What do you think?
No, my sense is that just one, the velocity of the plane and the fact that you have a plane filled with fuel hitting that building that burned, the velocity of the plane certainly had an impact on the structure itself. And then the fact that it burned and you had that intense heat probably weakened the structure as well. And I think it was simply the planes hitting the buildings and causing the collapse.
Yeah, right. Who is Jerome Auer anyway? He was the first director of New York City Mayor's Office of Emergency Management, a biowarfare expert, drug company director on the inside of the Bush administration. So, another, plant. On the second soundbite from the same interview, he's called a terrorism expert. That's what's on the screen, at least, along with his name on the little crawler at the bottom. Here's where the all-seeing eye network, CBS, begins connecting this attack with bin Laden. Jerome Auer, listen.
What perspective can you give us? I mean, there have been these repeated reports that, well, yes, Osama bin Laden, but some think he's been overemphasized as responsible for these kinds of events. I know many intelligence people at very high levels who say, listen, you can't have these kinds of attacks without having some state, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria, somebody involved. Put that into perspective for us.
Well, I'm not sure I agree that this is necessarily state-sponsored. It, as I mentioned earlier, certainly has the fingerprints of somebody like bin Laden.
All right, so you see, they plant the seeds of thought, and they grow in people's minds. Then all of the other parrot-like network grabs it and repeats it over and over, and then we get to the insanity that we're at. When I come back, we'll flip over to the MSNBC broadcast that morning. This is a Spaceman on AM 640. Talk Radio. Back in a minute.
The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm a guy that calls space. This is A View from Space on AM 640. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Now, I did promise one of my emailers who lost her sister on Flight 11 that she said, you can't tell me it didn't happen. How did she disappear if there were no towers, planes hitting towers? All right. The passenger list, very, very tiny. Very tiny indeed. Way too small, as a matter of fact, for these cross-America flights. Planes are huge. They carry a lot of people. As a matter of fact, the 757 carries 289 people. This was the plane that all of the people were loaded on. In all, there were 266 people on board all of the aircraft. 266. I suggest this is what happened there. Yes, there was an American Airways Flight 11. Yes, it did leave Logan. There was a United Airlines Flight 175 that they say crashed into the South Tower. Yes, it did leave Logan. And there was an American Airlines 77, the 757 that crashed the 757 that crashed, shot down actually over Pennsylvania. Another Boeing 757, United Airlines 93, I'm sorry. The American Airlines 77, I believe, took off also. All of these aircraft, including the one shot down over Pennsylvania, the Boeing 757. So you had American Airlines Flight 11, United Airlines Flight 175, American Airlines 77, and UAL 93, all meeting at an undisclosed airport. I don't know where it was, but you can imagine, say you're on American Airlines 11, you've just taken off. All of a sudden, the pilot says, we have whatever kind of trouble. We'll have to land immediately at this other airport, and we're going to exchange planes. Could you see that scenario happening? In all of these flights except for the United Airlines 93, the one shot down over Pennsylvania. I submit to you this. Those airlines, Flight 11, 175, and 77, all passengers, they would number 266, were put on to one aircraft. All of them were told the same story. We got to land, we got trouble, we're going to put you on another airplane, and we'll continue our journey. Don't worry about it, everything's fine. So they land at this undisclosed airport, possibly a military airport. They load all the passengers onto the Pennsylvania one. And now we have 3 empty jets. Do with them what you will. Get rid of them, whatever. I told you already that in American Airlines 11, the 767, has been listed as destroyed. UAL 175 is listed as still being around somewhere. But I'm saying all of the people are loaded onto one aircraft. There are 266 people. There's just 90-some on 60 on one, 64 on one of them. You put all those people onto the Pennsylvania aircraft and then set it off towards Los Angeles. They don't know if they're going to New York or whatever. They all think they're going to their area, where they're going. Then you have the United States military shooting down UAL Flight 93 over Shanksville, Pennsylvania. There's eyewitnesses. I got them right here. Eyewitnesses, Flight 93, saying, "Oh my God, it blew up in the air." There was a lady, by the way, debris was scattered 8 miles away, which tells you it blew up in the air. Little, very tiny little pieces. It got blown to smithereens. There was a white jet following it, unmarked white jet. A lady said it almost took her head off. There were a few others, too. I heard like a boom, and the engine sounded funny, lady told the news. I heard 2 more booms, and then I didn't hear anything. It came low over the trees. It started wobbling. Resident of Somerset County said he was working nearby a strip mine. And then one of the women was taking her child to school, and she said this unmarked jet, but the size of a Learjet, it was a fighter jet, but unmarked. That was the one that was following Flight 93 and shot it out of the sky, getting rid of all of the passengers, of course. And with the cell phones, and everybody was making cell phone calls, let me tell you, you could not make a cell phone call from an aircraft in 2001. It was virtually impossible. First of all, you were going too fast, and at a certain altitude, there was no way a cell phone would ever work. So then they said, okay, well, guys like Todd Beamer called from airphones. No, not buying it. Some people called their husbands up to 4 times, like Olson. Cell phones did not work in commercial jets. You could not use them to contact anyone. So that corroborates my hypothesis that they were all landing at a secret location. All people were put onto one aircraft. That one aircraft took off, and they blew that baby out of the sky. And then they were free to spin their lie web of one hitting the Pentagon. And if you watch the footage, you know damn well it's not an aircraft. The most secure area in the world had to be the Pentagon. The most secure, I'm telling you, with television cameras watching every angle, and they don't have any clear view of an aircraft coming in and plowing into the building. You've got to be kidding me. It's the most secure area in the entire world. It doesn't have good enough closed-circuit television cameras to pick up an airplane that came in and crashed into the building. I need answers from that again. Don't give me emotion. I don't want to look at the footage of people screaming and yelling in the dust and the heroes of the fire department and the police and all those wonderful people. I don't want the emotion. I do not want the feeling. I want answers. Give me the answers first. Then I will go with your emotion. Then I will say, wow, those people were beyond the call of just an exceptional fortitude, just incredible bravery. But I'm not going to be just fed that and accept all of the lies. Or you tell me they're not lies by giving me some kind of answer that is logical, that fits, that puts it together. You can't say they probably fell, the buildings probably fell down because of the intense heat. No, I want the proof that it melted the steel. And while you're at it, tell me how Muhammad Atta's driver's license, which is made of paper, didn't burn. I got to have an answer to that. Because all you're doing there is giving irrefutable proof that he was there. Because there's his ID. There, he's sitting right there. So if his ID was there, he was there. See? So. And George W. My. Saying he saw the first plane hit that morning when no one saw the first plane until day 2 on a Wednesday, the September 12th day. The Nade brother footage was then shown. Bush's actions are very strange. Have you heard the fact that Dick Cheney has just come out with a book, strangely enough, about his work in 2001, being George W.'s vice president? And he actually comes out and says, I believe the book's called In My Time, that he says, I actually ran the country for a while there from a secret location. George W. wasn't. Well, you're damn right he was running it, because George W. couldn't run it. He couldn't handle any of that because he wasn't privy to what was going on. They kept him totally and completely in the dark, as I'll show next on A View from Space. It's AM 640. This is Talk Radio.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the rights to free speech while he still can. On AM 640.
Spaceman AM 640 and View from Space, final segment tonight. I just wanted to tell the story quickly of Susan McElwain in Stony Creek Township. Small white jet with rear engines, no discernible markings, swoops low over her minivan near an intersection and disappeared over a hilltop, nearly clipping the tops of the trees lining the ridge, she said. It was less than a minute later, McElwain said, that the ground shook and a white plume of smoke appeared over the ridge. It was so close to me, I ducked. I heard it hit, and I saw the smoke. All I could think of was how close I came to dying. About a mile north of Buckstown Road, Dennis Decker and his buddy Rick Cheney were at work making wooden pallets when they heard an explosion and came running outside the house to watch a large mushroom cloud spreading over the ridge. As soon as we looked up, we saw a mid-sized jet flying low and fast. Decker said it appeared to make a loop or part of a circle, and then it turned fast and headed out. Decker and Cheney described the plane as a Lear jet type with engines mounted rear and tail and painted white with no identified markings. Same one as the woman Susan McElwain saw. This was the fighter jet, unmarked one. You know how cops drive around in unmarked cars? Well, so do the military. If you were here to see it, you would have no doubt, Decker said. It was a jet plane, and it had to be flying real close when that 757 went down. If I was FBI, I would find out who was flying that plane. Do you ever hear of these guys? Mr. Decker? Mr. Cheney? Ms. McElwain? No, you don't. You only hear Giuliani. You only hear the guys that are espousing the official story. Bush's actions, September 11, 2001, have been the subject of lively debate, mostly on the internet, but details reported that day and in the week after the attacks, both media reports and accounts given by Bush himself have changed radically over the past few years, culling hundreds of reporters from newspaper magazines. The internet has only made the finding of truth of what happened even harder, more confusing. In the changed political climate after 9/11, few people have dared raise challenging questions about Bush's actions. A journalist who said Bush was flying around the country like a scared child, seeking refuge in his mother's bed after having a nightmare, and another who said Bush skedaddled, were fired. The world should have a concise record of where George W. was throughout the day the U.S. was attacked. But we don't. Yet look what he and his Illuminati handlers are asking of us. First of all, to swallow this story with 1,000 holes in it. Then we're supposedly to blindly follow him into a bloody war that's designed to draw the entire world into it. Bush's appearance at the Emma E. Booker Elementary School in Sarasota, Florida on September 11, 2001 has been in the planning stages, I would expect, since August of 2001, but was only publicly announced on the morning of September 7th. Later that same day, 9/11 hijackers Mohammed Atta and Marwan Ashahi traveled to Sarasota, enjoyed drinks and dinner at a Holiday Inn only 2 miles from Sandy Beach, from where Bush was scheduled to stay during the Sarasota visit. Bush is briefed after the hijackings began. After his jog, Bush showers. Then he sits down to his daily intelligence briefing at around 8 in the morning, September 11. And the president's briefing appears to have included some reference to a heightened terrorist risk reported throughout the summer, but contained nothing specific, severe, or imminent enough to necessitate a call to National Security Advisor, then Condoleezza Rice. While Bush was being briefed, the planes that would be hijacked began taking off. American Airlines Flight 11 was first, leaving Boston's Logan Airport at 7:59. The others soon followed, except for Flight 93, United Airlines Flight 93, scheduled to leave at 8:01, but was delayed on the runway for about 40 minutes. Because 93 is the one that had to wait for the other ones to go to that airport and pick these other passengers up. That's why the delay of 40 minutes. So there's all kinds of problems with NORAD, the FAA grounding all flights as soon as there was a hijacked aircraft in the plane, aircraft in the sky. They took every single aircraft out. You would suggest that they would scramble fighter jets. No, nothing took off. Everyone was grounded. They took all of the flights that were in and around the airspace. Look at the control these guys had, and pushed these aircraft to land at other. We used Gander International Airport at Gander, Newfoundland, to take some of the flights on the East Coast there. Just get out of town. Don't go near New York City. Everything left alone. Because no one in authority wanted anyone to see a military jet, albeit unmarked, shot down United Airlines Flight 93 with all of the passengers of all of the flights onto it. Now, they fit on it. There were only 266 passengers in all the flights. A 757 seats. 289. No problem. The short passenger lists on all the flights, very, very curious. So, Bush, all of a sudden, is told. But he ignores it. That there is an attack going on. Claims of Bush's ignorance become harder and harder to believe when you find out that others in the motorcade were immediately told of the attack. For instance, Kia Baskerville, a CBS News producer, traveled with Bush that morning, received a message about a plane crash as the presidential motorcade headed to the first event. 15 minutes later, she was standing in a second-grade classroom waiting for Bush's entrance, which means she got the news at about 8:47, right as the story was first being reported. A news reporter for the motorcade overhears a radio transmission that Press Secretary Ari Fleischer then would be needed on arrival at the school to discuss reports of some sort of crash. Another account notes that Fleischer got the news that the crash had occurred just minutes before, but notes that Bush was not in the same car as Fleischer. Senior Presidential Communications Officer Tom Herman said, "Just as we were arriving at the school, I received a notification from our operations center that an airliner had struck one of the towers." This is as they're arriving at the school. Then George W. says, as he's waiting to go into the school, that he saw the first plane hit. You liar. You didn't have your story straight. You should keep your mouth shut. You're like the producer of Bryant Gumbel's show on CBS. The producer's wife, who blew her line. Some people at the school also heard the news before Bush arrives, around 8:50. Tampa's Channel 8 reporter Jackie Barron was on the phone with her mother, who mentioned the first news reports. Almost at the same time, Brian Goff, a Fox reporter from Tampa, heard the same thing on his cell phone. Associated Press reporter Sonia Ross was also told of the crash by phone from associates. Florida Congressman Dan Miller, waiting in front of the school as part of the official greeting party, was told by an aide about the crash at about 8:55, before Bush arrived. You see what a liar he is? Given all this, how could Bush have been kept out of the loop and remained ignorant? How could he have been out of the loop because he was in a car? No. The previous night, Colony Resort manager Katie Klauber-Moulin toured the presidential limousine and marveled at all the phones and electronic equipment. Karl Rove, Bush's chief political strategist then, who was riding with Bush, used a wireless email device on 9/11 as well. There were many opportunities and means to alert the President of the United States. No, George W. was out of the loop. Dick Cheney and the boys were running the show and coordinating this incredible, horrendous false flag attack, now known to you today as 9/11. The event that changed your life forever. If they are telling the truth, you'd better find out the truth about all the questions that were asked tonight on A View from Space. Coast to Coast's next. This is AM 640. I'm Space.